Welcome, dear listeners. Tonight, let your thoughts drift gently as we take you on a peaceful journey. This is a space for calm, for quiet moments, and for the kind of stories that settle your heart and slow your breath. Make yourself comfortable, close your eyes if you wish, and allow the world to soften around you. Now, let's begin with tonight's story. Today's story is titled, The Keeper of Shadows: A Journey Through Light and Dark. Act 1, The Letter Under the Orange Tree. The afternoon sun stretched lazily across the quiet street of Alder Lane, where the breeze carried the scent of early summer blossoms through the open windows. Inside a modest little house with ivy creeping up its walls, Avon sat slouched on a worn sofa, half reading a book he had started weeks ago but hadn't found the energy to finish. The pages blurred together, his mind elsewhere restless, searching for something undefined. Perhaps it was the city's ceaseless noise, or maybe it was the monotony that clung to his days like morning fog. Avon had just turned 25 the week before. No party, no celebration. Just him, a cup of lukewarm tea, and the rain tapping gently on the windowsill. He had grown distant from many of the people he used to know, and work remote and uneventful gave little to stir his spirit. His world had shrunk into a predictable loop: emails, coffee, silence, and sleep. Then the letter came. It wasn't in an email or a text message like everything else in his life. It arrived in an actual envelope, handwritten, sealed with wax, and bearing a small orange blossom illustration at the corner. He found it resting atop the day's mail like something from a different era, fragile and almost glowing in the golden light of afternoon. He opened it with cautious fingers. The paper smelled faintly of lavender and earth. Dear Avon, it's been far too long since you walked among the trees. The orchard still remembers you. We've made some changes, and summer is ripening early this year. If you find yourself needing air, stories, and perhaps a bit of wonder, come visit. The old house stands waiting, as always. With warmth. Myra. Myra. His cousin. His childhood companion. She had always been a bit of an enigma, one part wanderer, one part storyteller. Years ago, she had inherited a plot of land on the edge of Wrenwood Valley. What began as a few fruit trees had blossomed into an entire orchard, with winding paths, secret groves, and, according to her last letter years ago, a mysterious listening tree that could hear your thoughts. Avon chuckled under his breath, something between disbelief and nostalgia. His fingers lingered on the paper. His eyes drifted to the window. Outside, the sun filtered through a neighbor's orange tree, casting flickering patterns on the pavement. For the first time in weeks, the air seemed to hold something else, a quiet call. Not urgent, not demanding. Just an invitation. The decision wasn't immediate, but it planted itself inside him like a seed. That night, he couldn't sleep. He kept seeing Myra's handwriting, hearing echoes of their adventures as children racing through fields, pretending to be knights guarding the apricot gate. He remembered the taste of her orchard's peaches, still warm from the sun. And most of all, he remembered the way time felt slower there, softer. By morning, he had made up his mind. He packed lightly just a small duffel, a notebook, his camera, and a book of poems he never finished. He left a note for his landlord, fed the cat that sometimes wandered into his porch, and locked the door behind him. The journey out of the city was a transition he could feel in his bones. The train rumbled past neighborhoods, then suburbs, until finally all he could see were rolling fields and scattered clouds. He changed onto a smaller local line, then a bus, and finally walked the last stretch. And that's when the air changed. It was warmer, richer. The wind carried scents he hadn't smelled in years: wild mint, damp earth, ripening fruit. The path curved down into a hollow, and there, nestled between flowering dogwoods and rows of plum trees, stood the house. It looked almost exactly as he remembered, though the ivy had crept further up its sides, and the wind chimes hanging from the porch sang a different melody. The orchard stretched beyond it like a living painting, golden and green, dotted with flecks of orange and ruby red. And standing by the gate, holding a basket full of apricots and grinning like a secret, was Myra. "Thought you'd never come," she said, brushing a strand of wind-blown hair behind her ear. "I wasn't planning to," Avon admitted. "But, something in the letter." Myra nodded, as if that was all the explanation she needed. "There's room here," she said. "For quiet. For dreaming again." He stepped through the gate, and as it closed behind him, it was as though the world shifted slightly, no longer rushing forward, but gently unfolding. Somewhere in the orchard, a wind stirred the trees, and the scent of peaches danced in the air like a welcome. Act 2, the road between then and now. The morning light poured into the room like a soft tide, golden and warm against the faded curtains. Avon blinked awake in the unfamiliar bed, still wrapped in the scent of lavender and old wood. For a moment, he didn't remember where he was, but then, the sound of leaves rustling in the orchard brought it all back. He was in Wrenwood. He was home, or at least, something like it. But let's rewind. Just 2 days earlier, he had still been in the city, debating whether or not to go. The letter lay folded in his pocket for a full day before he made a move. And when he finally began packing, it wasn't with excitement, but with a strange tenderness, as though he were tucking away the fragments of a version of himself he hadn't seen in a long time. He found himself choosing items with care: his grandfather's worn-out compass, a journal with pressed wildflowers between the pages, and an old music player loaded with forgotten playlists. Each item felt like a memory stitched to an emotion, little pieces of a younger Avon who once believed in small adventures and secret gardens. The next morning, he boarded the early train just before sunrise. The platform was quiet, the city still half asleep. As the train pulled out, Avon watched buildings blur into one another, gray on gray, until they gave way to vast open spaces and golden fields. With every passing mile, the world softened. The landscape unfolded like a painting in motion, wheat swaying like waves, patches of sunflowers blinking toward the sky, barns with peeling red paint tucked under wide skies. It had been years since Avon had seen a sky so open. The clouds moved slowly here, unhurried, as if time itself took deeper breaths in the countryside. He transferred to a smaller train, then a local bus filled with baskets of market produce, children in straw hats, and a woman knitting quietly by the window. The pace was gentle, the conversation sparse but kind. He realized he hadn't smiled at a stranger in weeks, maybe months, but here, it felt natural. A boy sitting next to him handed him a piece of dried mango and said, "You smell like city air." Avon laughed. "That bad, huh?" "Not bad," the boy replied. "Just different." And it struck Avon then he was different, too. Or at least, he wanted to be. The last stretch of the journey was on foot. The bus dropped him off at a bend in the road, where pavement gave way to packed earth and the trees formed a leafy arch overhead. A hand-painted sign on a wooden post read, "Stoneberry Orchard, 2. 4 miles. Beneath it, in smaller script, "The road is part of the arrival." Avon smiled. With his bag slung over his shoulder and the crunch of gravel beneath his boots, he walked. The air was sweet with honeysuckle, bees hummed nearby, and butterflies dipped through shafts of sunlight. He passed a small stream, then a weathered scarecrow wearing a tilted straw hat. Someone had placed a bouquet of daisies at its feet. The path curved through groves of peach and plum trees, and just as his legs began to ache, he crested a hill and saw the orchard spread out below him. The house stood tucked between rows of citrus trees, its blue roof peeking through the green. Wind chimes sang in the breeze, and a cat dozed on the porch railing. In that moment, Avon didn't feel like a guest. He felt expected. Now, in the stillness of his second morning here, Avon looked out the window. Myra had let him sleep in. He could hear her outside somewhere, singing softly to the trees like she used to. The kind of songs that didn't need an audience, just the sky. He stepped outside barefoot, feet sinking into the soft earth. The orchard was waking. Birds darted from branch to branch, sunlight flickered through the leaves, and dew clung to every surface. He followed the narrow path between rows of apricot trees, and memories bloomed with every step. He passed the old swing they built from rope and an olive tree. The fence he once helped paint, crooked in one corner. The hollow stump where Myra used to leave mystery notes, tiny riddles wrapped in ribbon. It was like stepping back into a story he had put down long ago. Only now, the story was waiting to be rewritten. Back at the porch, Myra greeted him with 2 mugs of coffee and a lopsided grin. Her hair was tied in a messy bun, her hands stained with blackberry juice. "Let me guess," she said, handing him a mug. "You followed the daisies." "I did," he replied, "and the scarecrow says hi." They sat in silence for a while, sipping coffee, and watching the orchard come alive. "Do you ever feel like time works differently here?" Avon asked. Myra tilted her head. "It doesn't pass. It ripens." And Avon, sitting there with sun on his face and warmth in his chest, felt something inside him begin to soften like the first bite of fruit after a long winter. Act 3, A House of Quiet Echoes. The house stood like a memory, sturdy yet softened by time. Ivy curled along the window frames, and the wooden steps creaked underfoot with the kind of welcome only age could offer. Avon followed Myra up the porch, his fingers brushing the railing that still bore the carved initials they had etched there as children, M+A//2008, barely visible beneath layers of polish and moss. "Hasn't changed a bit," Avon said. "Not on the outside," Myra replied. "But wait until you see what we've done inside." She pushed open the door, and the scent of citrus wood, dried herbs, and beeswax polish met him like a lullaby. Sunlight filtered in through gauzy white curtains, casting warm beams across the wooden floor. There were books everywhere stacked on window sills, crammed into old shelves, balanced on the arms of chairs like sleeping cats. And then there were the bottles. Dozens of them, in all shapes and colors, lined the fireplace mantel and a long table in the corner. Some were filled with dried petals, others with slips of paper, and a few shimmered faintly as if catching light that wasn't there. "You've been collecting memories," Avon whispered. Myra smiled, brushing a bit of dust from a cobalt blue jar. "Some are mine. Some belong to the orchard. And some, well, they just showed up." Avon ran his hand along the wall as he walked, feeling the texture of each groove in the wooden paneling. Every creak beneath his step sounded familiar. The hallway to the right still had the mural they painted one summer long ago: stars, trees, and a dragon with wild eyes. Myra had added to it over the years, a constellation of fireflies, a sleeping fox, and a spiral staircase that led nowhere. "It's like time is layered here," Avon said. "Every visit leaves a trace." "That's the idea," Myra replied. "This house listens." She showed him to his room, what used to be the attic. But now, the slanted ceiling was lined with fairy lights, and the bed was draped in quilts that smelled faintly of cedar and lavender. A telescope stood by the window, pointed toward the orchard. He set his bag down and opened the window wide. The orchard hummed below, full of birdsong, wind chimes, and the gentle rustling of leaves. In the distance, he could hear the faint clink of glass and the muffled bark of Myra's dog, Juniper, chasing squirrels again. There was something about this place, it didn't demand anything of him. No schedules. No pressure to be productive. Just space. And breath. Later that afternoon, Myra gave him the tour, though he already knew most of the paths by heart. Still, things had changed. They passed the circle of standing stones she'd arranged behind the old lemon grove. "For moon rituals," she said with a wink. They wandered into the sunroom, a small glass house filled with succulents, wind catchers, and a single weather journal left open on a table. Avon flipped through it, filled with poetry, half-finished sketches, and notes written in multiple handwritings. "Do you run a secret club here?" he asked, teasing. "Only for those who can see the orchard's second layer," she replied mysteriously. He wasn't sure if she was joking. Near the edge of the property, Myra stopped beneath a massive fig tree and looked out toward the hills. "You know," she said, "after the last storm, I almost sold this place. Too much damage. Too many roots torn up." "What changed your mind?" he asked. Myra hesitated, then reached into her pocket and pulled out a tiny, flat stone. Etched into it was a symbol, simple, circular, like a sun within a moon. "I found this at the base of the listening tree. No idea who left it, or what it means. But something told me, not yet. Not yet." Avon turned the stone over in his hand. It was warm, though the breeze had grown cooler. That night, he placed it on the windowsill beside his bed. As dusk fell, the house transformed again. The windows glowed amber, candles flickered in quiet corners, and the scent of cinnamon and cardamom drifted from the kitchen. Myra had prepared a light dinner: herbed flatbread, pickled peaches, and lentil stew with rosemary. They ate on the porch, legs propped on the railing, watching the last of the sunlight slip behind the trees. Fireflies began to pulse among the leaves, and a soft hush settled over the orchard like a lullaby. "You built a whole world here," Avon said quietly. Myra took a sip of chamomile tea. "It's not built. It's grown." And Avon, heart full and eyes heavy, thought maybe that was the difference between this place and everywhere else. The world beyond demanded you to construct a life, brick by brick. But here, in this quiet orchard and its dreaming house, life was allowed to grow. Act 4, The Orchard Breathes. The late afternoon sun cast its golden net across the orchard, and for the first time in months, Avon felt his breath match the rhythm of the world around him. Not the shallow, hurried inhale of city life, but a slow, rooted kind of breathing, the kind that fills not just your lungs, but your chest, your limbs, your thoughts. He walked barefoot down the winding path Myra called the sun thread, named for how it always caught the last light of day. The trees on either side seemed to lean toward him like old friends, their branches heavy with fruit. Orange trees, plum, fig, pear, a mosaic of scent and color. Some still carried blossoms, while others bore ripening orbs like treasure. The path forked at a worn stone bench wrapped in honeysuckle. He paused there, brushing aside a few fallen petals. In his notebook, he scribbled a single line: "Everything here grows like it remembers being loved." Myra had gone off to tend the herbs near the stream, leaving Avon to explore at his own pace. He moved quietly, letting the orchard reveal itself without intrusion. There was something sacred in the silence, not emptiness, but fullness unspoken. He passed a line of apricot trees buzzing with bees and paused by one particularly twisted trunk. Its bark spiraled like rope, and a hollow in its side revealed a tiny carving, a spiral within a square, etched in weathered lines. He frowned. It wasn't familiar. Myra would have shown him something like this before. He touched it lightly. The wood was cool, almost too cool, and the symbol felt oddly smooth compared to the rest of the bark. There was no plaque, no explanation. He noted it in his journal. Further down, the orchard opened into a small circular clearing where the grass grew wild and untamed. In the center stood what Myra had referred to only half seriously as the listening tree. A massive, ancient fig with roots that pushed out of the earth like resting limbs, its trunk wide enough for 3 people to wrap their arms around. He approached it with a quiet reverence, unsure if the legends Myra had woven about it were playful or true. As children, they'd pretended it could hear your thoughts, even answer them if you were still enough. Once, he swore he heard it whisper his name on a windless day. Standing beneath its wide canopy now, he wasn't sure what to expect. He placed a hand on the bark. It was warm. Not just sun-warmed, but alive. He closed his eyes and let the silence fill him. And in that stillness, something strange happened. His thoughts scattered all day began to settle, like leaves in a pond. Worries he hadn't realized he carried softened. The pace of his inner voice slowed. A memory surfaced, a night when he and Myra, no older than 12, lay beneath this very tree counting stars, whispering stories about constellations they invented. He remembered the name of one, the lantern keeper, a glowing figure who carried starlight between sleeping dreams. Had they really made that up? Or was it something the orchard had told them? He opened his eyes. The tree stood quiet, indifferent. Yet, he could have sworn the wind shifted only around its trunk, circling him once before moving on. A rustle to his left startled him. From the shadows of a fig bush emerged a small creature, a rabbit, or something like it. But its fur had a shimmer, not white or brown, but a soft silver sheen like moonlight. It froze, staring at him with large, dark eyes. They regarded each other in silence. Then it hopped twice and vanished into the underbrush. Avon laughed under his breath. "All right, Myra," he muttered. "What exactly is this place?" He made his way back toward the house as the sky deepened into hues of copper and rose. The light caught in the orchard like it didn't want to leave. Shadows stretched long across the ground, but they weren't cold or eerie. They moved like whispers, like the trees themselves were settling in for the evening. Myra was waiting on the porch, her bare feet up on the rail, a mug of tea steaming beside her. "How was your first solo wander?" she asked. "Strange," Avon replied honestly, sitting down beside her. "But not in a bad way." "The fig tree. It feels alive. And there's something carved into an apricot tree near the bend, a spiral in a square." Myra's eyebrows lifted, just slightly. "I don't remember carving that," she said. "But you're not the first to find something like it?" Avon turned to her. "Meaning?" "Some guests leave gifts," she said, sipping her tea. "Some take a bit of the orchard with them. And some just add things. It's part of the magic. Or the madness. Depending on your angle." He smiled, unsure if she was deflecting or simply letting him draw his own conclusions. "I also saw a rabbit," he added. But it shimmered. Silver. Like it was dipped in starlight. Myra didn't laugh. She just nodded slowly. It's summer. They come back sometimes. Avon stared at her. They. But she didn't answer. Instead, she pointed toward the orchard. Look. And there, flitting through the trees, were small orbs of light, not fireflies. Bigger. Brighter. Soft blue and white, dancing slowly between branches, dipping low and lifting high, as if weaving something unseen. Are those? Don't name them, Myra said gently. They don't like that. The lights pulsed once, then vanished. That night, Avon lay awake, the windows open, listening to the distant hum of the orchard. The breeze carried with it the scent of rosemary and rain, though the skies were clear. He couldn't tell if he was more grounded or more adrift. But he was certain of one thing. Something was waking up out here. And maybe, so was he. Act 5, Old Corin and the Secrets Beneath the Soil. The morning sun rose slowly over the orchard, painting everything in gold and green. Avon awoke to the sound of birds tapping gently against the window pane and the distant clink of metal on stone. He lay there for a moment, still under the heavy quilt, letting the sounds of the orchard filter through his thoughts like light through leaves. Myra had left a note by the bedside in her sprawling, looping handwriting. Gone to the market in Briar's Hollow. Breakfast's in the oven. If you're up for a story, find Corin near the South Plots. M. Corin. The name rang a distant bell. Avon sat up, ran a hand through his hair, and stepped into the cool wooden hallway. The oven was still warm, holding a small pie filled with figs and rosemary, crusted with flaky gold. He ate it with his fingers while watching the orchard wake through the kitchen window. Then he set off toward the South Plots. The southern edge of the orchard was different. Less manicured, less orderly. The trees were older here, their trunks thick and gnarled, their leaves darker. The light shifted between them in strange, patchy ways, as if the sun itself respected the space. It didn't take long to find Corin. He was exactly where Myra said he'd be, kneeling in the dirt between two rows of overgrown currant bushes, humming to himself and muttering in a rhythm Avon couldn't quite catch. He was a wiry old man, with a silver beard that reached his collarbone, skin like weathered bark, and hands stained with years of earth. He wore suspenders over a linen shirt too large for him, and a wide-brimmed straw hat that cast half his face in shadow. He didn't look up when Avon approached. "You're late," he said. Avon blinked. "Excuse me." Corin finally turned. His eyes were bright, almost too bright, like polished glass marbles. Dreamers shouldn't sleep in when the orchard's talking. Avon tried a half smile. "Myra said I might find you out here." she said. Might. Ha. I'm always here. Where else would I be? He stood slowly, bones cracking. You're the cousin, right? The one who forgot how to listen. I didn't forget, Avon said. I just got distracted. Happens. Corin dusted his hands off and gestured toward a twisted bench nestled between two plum trees. Well, come on then. Sit. Let's see if you still remember how to hear. They sat in silence at first. The kind of silence that made city people uncomfortable, full of buzzing things, rustling things, whispering things. Corin didn't say a word. Just pulled a thin wooden pipe from his pocket, lit it, and let the smoke curl upward like ghost stories rising into the branches. Then, finally, you see that fig tree down the hill. Avon nodded. She's the heart. The heart. Corin tapped the side of his pipe. The orchard ain't just trees and roots. It remembers. Holds things. Feels things. And the fig's been here longer than any of us. Longer than your cousin. Longer than me. That's poetic, Avon said, unsure. Corin narrowed his eyes. It's not poetry, lad. It's warning. Avon shifted on the bench. I always thought Myra exaggerated a little, he said carefully. All the stories. Lights in the trees. Whispering bark. Shimmering rabbits. Corin snorted. She understates, if anything. Most folks don't want to hear the truth. The orchard changes shape. Not on the outside, but inside. It's like a house with too many doors, and not all of them open to the same kind of place. Avon leaned forward. What do you mean? Corin hesitated. Then, slowly, he reached into the canvas bag beside him and pulled out a book, thin, bound in dark leather, and wrapped in twine. Found this buried near the southeast road 2 winters ago, he said. Just beneath a dead persimmon tree. No name. No year. But look inside. Avon undid the twine and opened the book. Every page was filled with sketches. Strange plants he'd never seen. Symbols, spirals, keys, constellations shaped like eyes. One page showed a figure standing beneath the fig tree, holding up their hand, with small floating orbs dancing around them just like the lights he saw last night. Another page was entirely blackened with charcoal, with a single word scrawled in the center, stay. He looked up, unsettled. Who drew these? No one who's still here, Corin said. But they were listening. That much I know. A breeze moved through the trees. Suddenly, Corin stood. "You're not ready yet," he said. "But the orchard will test you. Not with monsters or mazes. With choices. With memories. It'll show you things you forgot, or didn't want to know." He turned to go, but paused after a few steps. "Tell Myra to burn lavender at the western stones. Tonight. She'll know why." Then he disappeared into the trees. Avon sat on the bench for a long while after. The orchard no longer felt entirely welcoming. Not threatening, but watching. The silence was heavier now. The shadows a little deeper. Like the land had lifted its gaze. He returned to the house with the leather book pressed tight against his side. That evening, Myra returned with bags of vegetables, honey, and a half loaf of rye bread from the market. She noticed the look on his face immediately. "Corin found you." "He did." "And?" Avon handed her the book. She held it for a moment, then opened it slowly, carefully, like she was handling a dream. When she saw the blackened page with "Stay," her face tightened. "I'll prepare the lavender," she said quietly. "You knew about this." "I suspected." She touched the edge of the page. "There are places in the orchard even I haven't walked. Some corners don't belong to time." They said little over dinner. Later that night, just before midnight, Avon watched from the window as Myra lit a small bundle of lavender and walked barefoot toward the western stones. The wind had picked up slightly. The trees swayed not with force, but with purpose. She placed the lavender in a shallow bowl and let it burn, smoke curling into the dark, spiraling like the symbol Avon had found on the apricot tree. As the smoke rose, so did a sound, not from her, not from the earth, but from somewhere between. A sound like old pages turning. Act 6, The Dusk of the Orchard. The air had changed by the time the evening came. The golden warmth of the day slowly dissolved into soft violet and deep amber as the sun dipped lower behind the hills. Avon stepped out onto the porch, the wood cool beneath his bare feet, and breathed in the shifting air. The scent of night-blooming jasmine mingled with the fresh earthiness of the orchard, a sweet yet grounding fragrance that reminded him of forgotten summers. Myra had gone back to the west side of the orchard, following the lavender smoke trail, leaving him alone for a moment. The house, with its wooden beams and ivy-covered walls, felt like it belonged to another world, a place that stretched through time but stood still in the present. Avon walked slowly, his eyes tracing the edges of the orchard, where shadows started to lengthen and mingle with the fading daylight. He paused near the old fig tree again. Its gnarled branches stretched upward like ancient arms, reaching toward the heavens. The memory of the earlier encounter lingered, the strange feeling in the air, the warmth of its bark, and the odd sensation that the tree had listened. His thoughts were interrupted by a faint sound, a whispering, almost imperceptible, coming from deeper in the orchard. The air shifted again, like a sudden draft, but there was no wind. It was as though the trees themselves were speaking, their leaves rustling in an almost deliberate rhythm. Avon turned, but the sound didn't come from the breeze. It was something more, purposeful. It was as if the orchard were alive, stretching and waking, turning towards something. Curious, Avon moved cautiously toward the source of the noise, stepping over roots and past clusters of fruit. The sun was now a fading ember in the sky, casting the orchard in a warm, eerie light. The shadows grew darker, deeper, and the air became thick with anticipation. Something was happening, something that pulsed in the air, invisible yet tangible, like a heartbeat just beneath the surface. As he neared the dense thicket of trees, the sounds grew louder, more distinct. It was a strange hum, not quite a song, not quite a murmur, but something that seemed to come from the very earth beneath his feet. The hair on the back of his neck stood up. He was not alone in this part of the orchard. Just then, Myra appeared at the far side of the grove. She was walking slowly, a lantern in one hand, the other trailing over the tops of the fruit trees as though she were touching the pulse of the land itself. "Stay away from that part of the orchard," she called out softly, her voice carrying on the wind. "It's not time yet." Avon froze. "Not time for what?" he asked, his voice a little more urgent than he intended. Myra stopped in her tracks. She looked at him with an unreadable expression, her lantern casting flickering shadows across her face. There was something in her eyes, something both knowing and hesitant. "The orchard doesn't show itself to just anyone," she said, her tone a mix of warning and sadness. "It chooses when to reveal what's buried beneath. There's history here. A story older than the house, older than anything you've seen." Avon took a step forward. "History? What kind of history?" Myra's eyes narrowed, and she walked toward him, the lantern swinging gently in her hand. "There are parts of the orchard that have been here longer than anyone knows. Things were planted here before my family arrived. And there are things beneath the soil that aren't meant to be disturbed." Avon glanced back at the grove, where the whispering continued, rising in volume, almost as though the trees were calling to him. He could feel a pull, an unspoken invitation, something urgent that tugged at his chest. "But why now?" he asked. "Why is it calling to me?" Myra shook her head, her voice low. "Because the land knows. It knows when someone is ready to listen, or when they're not." She didn't say anything more. Instead, she walked past him and toward the center of the orchard, where the ground dipped slightly into a natural clearing. The sounds of the trees faded, replaced by the steady hum of crickets and the distant rustle of the wind. Avon followed her, unable to resist the pull. He couldn't explain it, but the sensation was too powerful. He had to know more. As they reached the clearing, Avon noticed something strange. A circle of stones stood in the center of the space, partially covered with moss, their surfaces dark and weathered. These stones were not natural, they had been placed with intention, arranged in a pattern that made the ground beneath them feel alive. The air here was heavy, almost thick with something unsaid. Myra stopped at the edge of the circle. "This is where things are kept," she said quietly, her voice reverberating against the stones. "Where the land remembers." Avon looked at her. "Remembers what?" But Myra didn't answer. Instead, she set the lantern down and took a step back. "You'll see soon enough. The orchard always reveals what's needed. Just, don't get too close." The sky was now deep purple, and the first stars began to twinkle in the east. The lantern's flickering flame was the only light between them and the gathering darkness. The wind picked up once again, but it was different now. It was carrying something else, something deep, something old. Avon stepped closer to the stone circle. He couldn't help himself. His hand hovered just above one of the stones, and as his fingers brushed against it, the air shifted. A low, almost imperceptible rumble echoed beneath the earth. The trees seemed to lean toward him, their branches creaking, their trunks twisting as though the orchard was awakening. Myra's voice cut through the moment. "Get back, Avon." But it was too late. As his fingers made contact with the stone, the ground beneath him shuddered. A bright light flared at the center of the stone circle, shooting upward in a twisting, spiraling pattern. The ground trembled, and the air thickened with energy. Avon staggered back, but the light didn't stop. It surged, faster, brighter, until the orchard seemed to hold its breath. And then, just as suddenly as it had started, everything stilled. The light faded. The air cleared. The ground settled. Avon stood in the middle of the circle, his heart pounding, his hands trembling. "What just happened?" he whispered. Myra was silent for a long time. Finally, she spoke, her voice heavy with something unspoken. "The orchard has chosen." Avon turned to look at her. "Chosen for what?" Her gaze met his, and for the first time since he'd arrived, Avon saw something ancient and knowing in her eyes. "That, Avon, is a story for another time." Act 7, The Last Dinner Beneath Starry Lights. The night had settled quietly over the orchard. The golden light of dusk had faded into a velvet sky, now dotted with stars that shone with an unusual clarity. The crickets were chirping their steady song, and the wind had calmed to a soft whisper that seemed to hum through the trees. Avon sat on the porch, watching the stars appear one by one as Myra moved around the kitchen inside. She was preparing dinner in silence, the air thick with the weight of the day's events. The incident with the stone circle still lingered in his mind, a memory that pulsed with a strange energy, like something that wasn't finished, something waiting. He couldn't shake the feeling that the orchard was watching him. Not just the trees, but the land itself. It was as if the ground, the stones, and even the air held memories of all those who had walked here before. The light had felt too alive, too intentional when he touched the stone. Myra came out, holding a wooden tray laden with bread, cheese, and a jar of preserves. She set it down beside him, her eyes tired but steady. "I should have warned you," she said softly, taking a seat beside him. "About the stones. About the orchard. It's been quiet for a long time." Avon looked at her, confused. "But you knew. You felt it too, didn't you?" Myra nodded, her fingers brushing over the edge of her plate. "Yes. But there's a difference between knowing and being ready. The orchard only speaks when it's needed. When it's time to wake up." She paused, her gaze flicking toward the dark shape of the trees beyond the porch. "And now, I'm afraid it's too awake." The silence between them grew heavier as the shadows lengthened. Avon felt a chill despite the warmth of the evening. Something was building in the air, something unspoken. His eyes kept drifting toward the distant orchard, where the shapes of the trees blended with the darkness, and the faintest glow seemed to flicker through the leaves, a soft, ethereal light, not like the stars, but something different, something wrong. "Do you see that?" Avon asked, his voice low, uncertain. Myra followed his gaze, her expression unreadable. "It's starting again," she murmured. Avon stood up suddenly, his heart racing. The light in the orchard flickered, pulsed, and then flared. It seemed to shimmer in the air itself, bending and twisting like something alive, something that didn't belong. "What is it?" he asked, his voice strained with the need for an answer. Myra stood too, her movements calm but deliberate. "It's the lights. They come when the orchard calls. But they don't show themselves for just anyone. They're connected to the land. To this place." Avon felt a wave of confusion rush over him. "But I've seen them before. The light. The thing in the fig tree. The stones. I touched them, Myra. What is happening here?" Myra's face softened, her voice quiet. "This is why I didn't want you here." Avon's eyes widened. "What do you mean?" "The orchard," Myra started, but she trailed off. She took a deep breath, her face turning serious. "It's a guardian. A keeper of things people have forgotten. The stones, the lights, they're all part of a system older than us. The orchard remembers things. It protects things. And it doesn't let anyone forget." "Forget what?" Avon asked, the words tumbling out of him. "What do you mean forget?" Myra reached into the pocket of her apron and pulled out the stone that Corin had given him earlier. She placed it in his hand. "This is part of it," she said, looking into his eyes. "The orchard never forgets. But sometimes, the land needs help remembering. And when it calls to those who are willing to listen." Avon felt the weight of the stone in his hand. Its surface was smooth, warm to the touch. He turned it over, feeling a strange pulse within it, like the heartbeat of the earth itself. At that moment, the lights in the orchard flared again, this time brighter, swirling in the air like they were searching for something. Or someone. "It's happening again," Myra said, her voice tinged with something else, fear, perhaps, or caution. "The lights are choosing. It's not just the orchard anymore. It's all of it. The stones. The lights. The land, and now, you." Avon turned to face her. "I don't understand. Why me? Why now?" Myra didn't answer immediately. Instead, she stood up and moved toward the gate of the orchard, her steps slow but purposeful. "Avon, I never told you the whole story. About the orchard. About why we're here," she said, turning back to him. "The lights, the stones, the whispers in the trees, they're a part of something bigger. It's not just nature. It's a cycle. And the cycle is about to shift." Avon felt his heart beat faster. "What are you talking about?" "Everything here," Myra said, her voice shaking slightly, "everything in the orchard, it waited for you to come back. And now it's too late to stop it?" The air seemed to grow colder as they stood there, the strange lights flickering in the trees. Myra's expression was serious, distant, as if she were somewhere else entirely, thinking about things Avon couldn't even begin to comprehend. The tension was thick, and Avon felt his pulse quicken as the glow of the lights pulsed with a rhythmic, almost hypnotic cadence. The earth beneath them seemed to vibrate, the ground humming with an energy that was not quite natural. "Tell me what I need to do," Avon said, his voice tight. Myra's eyes locked with his. She took a long, steadying breath. "Survive the night. The orchard will reveal its truth, but only if you're ready to face it." And with that, she turned toward the glowing light in the distance. Avon stayed where he was for a moment longer, his mind racing, his heart pounding in his chest. The air was thick with a strange, unearthly feeling. The orchard was no longer a peaceful retreat, no longer a place of gentle winds and rustling leaves. It was a place of secrets, a place where the land held more than it was willing to share. He looked toward the light, his gaze fixed on the flickering orbs that danced through the trees. He didn't know what was waiting for him, but he knew one thing for certain. The orchard had begun to wake, and he wasn't sure he was ready to hear what it had to say. Act 8, the final warm evening. The night had deepened, and the orchard was alive with a strange energy. Avon sat on the porch, his eyes never leaving the swirling lights that now seemed to pulse rhythmically within the trees. The stars were bright overhead, the sky clear and wide, but beneath that vastness, there was something else, something heavier that hung in the air like a breath held too long. Myra had gone back to the house after a long, silent walk through the orchard, her footsteps barely audible in the soft, grass-covered earth. She had left him there, on the porch, alone to confront what was stirring beneath the surface of the land. The orchard, once peaceful and welcoming, now felt more like a place that held its breath, waiting for something to happen. Avon's mind was racing. The strange lights, the energy in the air, the things Myra had said. The orchard is waking up. It's too late to stop it. These words echoed in his mind like a song that played on repeat, each time more urgent, more haunting. He rose from the porch and moved towards the edge of the orchard, the glow of the lights pulling him like a magnetic force. The trees whispered above him, their branches swaying despite the stillness of the air. The lights were brighter now, almost blinding, their movement precise and calculated. It was as if the orchard was watching him, as if it were aware of his every step, his every thought. Avon paused before stepping into the grove. The world around him seemed to hold its breath. Suddenly, a sound broke the stillness, a low, rumbling hum that seemed to come from the very ground beneath his feet. The earth vibrated with an ancient, unfamiliar rhythm. The sound grew louder, closer, as though something was awakening deep within the earth, beneath the roots of the trees. Avon, a voice called, breaking through the noise. He turned to find Myra standing behind him, her face illuminated by the lantern she held in her hand. Her expression was unreadable, but her eyes, those eyes were filled with something he couldn't name. Fear. Regret. Or something deeper. "What's happening?" he asked, his voice a little hoarse. "The orchard is remembering," she said softly. "And it's not just the orchard. It's everything." Avon's heart skipped a beat. Everything. Myra nodded, stepping closer. "You felt it too, didn't you? The earth, the air, the trees, they're all coming alive with something old. Something ancient." Avon looked around, trying to make sense of the chaos in his mind. The lights were dancing in front of him now, weaving between the trees, their glow bright and disorienting. The hum beneath his feet was growing louder, vibrating through his bones, sending shivers down his spine. "What is it?" he whispered, unable to look away from the strange display before him. "It's the pulse of the land," Myra said, her voice growing more urgent. "The orchard doesn't just grow fruit. It holds memories. Secrets. And now, those memories are rising." Before Avon could ask more, the ground beneath him shook. A deep tremor vibrated through the soil, like a rumble from the heart of the earth itself. The trees swayed, their branches creaking and groaning, as though they were stretching after a long sleep. Avon stumbled, his breath catching in his throat. "What's happening?" he gasped. Myra grabbed his arm, her grip tight. "It's happening. It's waking up." The lights in the trees flared brighter, and Avon felt a pull in his chest, something deep pulling him forward. He wanted to resist, to run, but the orchard held him in place, its force too strong to ignore. And then, Just as suddenly as the tremors had started, the ground stilled. The trees stopped their creaking, and the hum beneath their feet faded into a strange silence. The lights blinked once, then settled, becoming soft and steady, like stars held in the branches themselves. Avon and Myra stood in the middle of the grove, breathing heavily, the air thick with the weight of the moment. It felt as though something had changed, something irreversible. "It's not over," Myra said, her voice shaking. Avon looked at her. "What do you mean?" Myra stepped forward, her gaze distant. "The orchard, it's calling to you. And once it calls, it never lets go." Avon's heart raced. He had no idea what to do with that information. The orchard had changed, he could feel it in his bones. It was no longer a place of peace and quiet. It was a place of purpose, of ancient forces that were beyond his understanding. The night had settled into a haunting stillness, and yet Avon felt like the world was holding its breath, waiting for something. Waiting for him to make the next move. Myra turned back toward the house. "We need to get inside," she said. "The orchard will reveal itself when it's ready. But not yet. We can't let it control everything. Not tonight." Avon followed her, but as he glanced back at the glowing trees, he couldn't shake the feeling that he had just witnessed something monumental, something that was only the beginning of whatever the orchard had planned. Inside the house, the warmth of the hearth contrasted with the cold uncertainty that gripped him. Myra placed the lantern down on the table and began to prepare something quietly in the kitchen, her movements deliberate but absent-minded, as if she were lost in thought. Avon sat by the fire, his mind racing with everything he had seen. The lights, the hum, the strange sensation in his chest, as if the orchard itself had spoken to him, or maybe just called. What had it wanted? What had he been meant to do? Myra finally broke the silence, her voice soft but filled with resolve. "There's a reason you came here, Avon. A reason you were called back. The orchard remembers. And now, so must you." Avon stared at her, his mind swirling with questions. "What do you mean?" "The truth," she said. "You're not just here to visit. You're part of this place now. And the orchard won't let you leave until you understand why." Avon felt a shiver run down his spine as Myra's words settled over him. The orchard had already chosen him. He could feel it in the air, the weight of its presence pressing down on him like a living thing. And now, it was only a matter of time before everything was revealed. But what would it reveal? As the fire crackled beside him, Avon knew that the answers were close. Too close. And yet, he couldn't shake the feeling that whatever was coming, it was not going to be something he could run from. Act 9, Farewell to the Orchard's Embrace. The first light of dawn trickled through the curtains, casting pale beams across the room. Avon awoke to the same warmth that had comforted him the night before, but it felt different now, heavier, somehow. The fire in the hearth had burned low, leaving only the soft, crackling embers that whispered in the silence of the early morning. He sat up slowly, rubbing his eyes, still trying to shake off the strange dreams that had plagued him throughout the night. Dreams of the orchard, its twisting trees, the glowing lights, and the murmurs that had filled the air as if the earth itself was speaking. He reached for his journal, now thick with notes and sketches. The orchard had called to him in ways he didn't understand. It had been so familiar, yet so foreign. It was as if a part of him had been awakened, something deep inside that he hadn't known was there. But now, the feeling was gone. The orchard, the strange lights, the pulse in the earth, it was as though they had all slipped away during the night, leaving only the quiet hum of the world to fill the void. Avon glanced toward the window. The orchard was quiet now, still as the morning mist settled over it. The trees were dark against the lightning sky, their branches stiff and motionless. The world outside seemed peaceful, untouched by the chaos of the night before. He stood and moved toward the door, but before he could open it, he heard a soft knock. "Myra," he called. The door creaked open, and Myra stepped in, her face drawn and weary. She was still dressed in her night clothes, her hair wild and unkempt as if she, too, had been awake for most of the night. Her eyes were tired but sharp, filled with a mix of sadness and resolve. "I'm leaving, Myra," Avon said, his voice quiet but firm. "I don't belong here. Not anymore." Myra stood in the doorway for a moment, silent. Then she stepped forward, closing the door softly behind her. "You don't have to go," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "The orchard needs you, Avon." Avon shook his head. "It doesn't need me. It's been here long before I arrived, and it will be here long after I leave." "You don't understand," Myra replied, her eyes flicking toward the window where the orchard stood, quiet and still. "The orchard doesn't just call anyone. It called you. You're a part of it now. You always have been." "I don't even know what that means," Avon said, his voice tight with frustration. "You said the orchard has memories, but I don't know my memory. How am I supposed to be part of something that I don't even understand?" Myra stepped closer to him, her hand reaching out to rest gently on his arm. "You've already been through it, Avon. You've felt it, haven't you? The pull. The sense that there's something inside of you that belongs here." Avon looked at her, his expression torn. He felt it, yes. He felt the call, the weight of the land, the strange connection he had to the orchard. But he couldn't explain it. It didn't make sense. "I don't remember anything." "Not the way you do," Avon said, his voice low. "I don't remember the past. I don't know what's buried here. I'm just trying to get out." Myra looked down for a moment, her hand falling from his arm. "Maybe that's why the orchard is calling you," she said softly. Maybe you're meant to remember. To understand what happened here before, what happened to you. Remember. Avon repeated, his mind racing. What happened to me? Everything that's been hidden, Myra said, her voice thick with emotion. The orchard holds more than just fruit and trees. It holds memories. And if you're willing to face them, you'll understand everything. But it's not going to be easy. Avon stared at her, trying to piece together the fragments of their conversation, trying to make sense of the words she was saying. I don't want to stay here, he said, his voice shaking. I don't want to be part of whatever this is. Myra's expression softened, and she stepped closer, her gaze steady. You don't have a choice. Not anymore. Avon took a deep breath and walked to the window, staring out at the orchard. The first rays of sunlight were breaking through the trees, casting long shadows across the grass. The air was still, too still, and the ground felt different beneath his feet, as though the earth itself was waiting for him to make his next move. The orchard had chosen him, and now, he could feel it. The weight of its ancient eyes watching him, the pull of the earth beneath his feet. The secrets, the memories, it was all waiting for him. But the question was, could he face them? Could he confront the truth that lay hidden beneath the soil, the truth about his past? Myra was standing behind him now, silent, waiting for him to speak. But Avon couldn't bring himself to say anything more. He felt like he was trapped between two worlds, the world he had known and the world the orchard was trying to show him. The world that had called him here. I'm not ready, Avon said, his voice barely audible. I don't even know where to start. You don't have to start anywhere, Myra said gently. The orchard will show you. It always does. You just have to listen. Avon turned back to her, his eyes filled with uncertainty. But what if I don't want to listen? What if I don't want to remember? Myra smiled sadly. Then you'll never know the truth. Avon stood there for a long time, his thoughts swirling. The orchard had been waiting for him, had been calling him. And now, as the morning sun bathed the orchard in golden light, he knew he had a choice to make. But the decision was too big, too overwhelming. He didn't know if he was ready to face whatever lay hidden beneath the surface, whatever the orchard had been holding for so long. But part of him knew that he couldn't leave, not yet. The silence between them stretched on, broken only by the distant sound of the wind rustling through the trees. The decision was his, but the weight of it pressed down on him, suffocating. Finally, he spoke, his voice soft but steady. Okay. I'll stay. But only for a little while longer. I need to know what this is. What I am. Myra nodded, her expression softening with a mixture of relief and sadness. Then we'll face it together. As Avon turned back to the orchard, he felt a shiver run through him. He had made his choice. And now, the orchard would reveal what it had been hiding all along. The next chapter was about to begin. Act 10, returning with the weight of new memories. The morning was quiet, too quiet, as if the entire orchard had held its breath overnight, waiting for Avon to make his move. The air was still, heavy with anticipation, and the once vibrant orchard now seemed to have taken on a more somber tone. The trees stood tall and rigid, their branches outstretched, like silent witnesses to something both old and new, something that had been buried beneath the soil for far too long. Avon stepped out of the house and onto the porch, feeling the weight of the air press down on him. His eyes scanned the orchard, searching for anything that could help him make sense of the strange pull he had felt ever since his arrival. The lights, the hum beneath the earth, the whispers in the wind. It was as if the land itself had been calling to him, urging him to remember something he had forgotten. And now, he had no choice but to listen. Myra was already outside, standing near the gate of the orchard, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. Her expression was unreadable, a mix of sorrow and understanding in her eyes. "You're going to do it, aren't you?" she asked, her voice quiet but steady. Avon nodded slowly, his heart pounding in his chest. He had known, deep down, that he couldn't leave. Not now. Not when there was still so much to uncover. So much that the orchard was holding back, keeping hidden beneath its roots. "I have to," Avon said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know why, but I have to." Myra watched him for a long moment, her gaze softening. "The orchard has a way of pulling people in," she said. "It makes you believe that you're meant to be here. That you've always been a part of it." Avon's gaze turned toward the trees again. "I feel like I have always been a part of it. But the question is, who am I really? Why does this place feel like it's been waiting for me?" The wind stirred the leaves in the trees, sending ripples through the branches. The air was thick with the smell of earth and fruit, and as Avon stepped closer to the gate, the world around him seemed to quieten. The hum beneath his feet had returned, gentle but persistent, as if the earth itself was calling to him, urging him to come closer. Myra stepped aside, her face unreadable. She didn't speak again. There was no need. She had said all she could, and now, the orchard's secrets were his to discover. Avon took a deep breath and stepped into the orchard. The moment his foot touched the earth, everything shifted. It wasn't just the ground beneath his feet, though it did feel different, more alive than it had before. The trees around him seemed to lean toward him, their branches bending as if reaching out to greet him. The air was thicker now, heavier with the weight of unspoken things, and the lights that had danced between the trees before were now more intense, more focused, almost as if they were guiding him. He followed the light, moving deeper into the grove, his heart racing as the pull grew stronger. The hum beneath the earth was louder now, vibrating through his chest, filling his ears with its strange rhythm. The closer he got, the more he could feel the weight of history pressing down on him, the weight of everything that had happened before him, everything that was waiting to be revealed. At the center of the orchard, the stone circle was just as he had left it. The stones were still there, weathered by time but standing tall and firm. But this time, they felt different, alive, somehow. They radiated a faint energy, as if the very earth beneath them had awakened, and was now waiting for him to step forward. Avon hesitated for only a moment before stepping into the circle. The moment his foot crossed the threshold, the earth beneath him seemed to shift. The air thickened, and the lights that had been flickering around the orchard converged on the stone circle, dancing in a pattern that felt intentional, like they were waiting for him to make the next move. He took another step forward, and suddenly, the ground trembled beneath him. The stones began to glow, faint at first, then growing brighter, brighter, until they were glowing with an intense light that seemed to fill the entire orchard. The hum beneath his feet intensified, and the world around him seemed to fade into the background. For a moment, there was only the stone circle, the light, and the hum. And then, there was something else, a voice. It wasn't spoken aloud, but it was clear in his mind, a voice that felt both familiar and distant. "You have come," the voice said, its tone deep and resonant, like the earth itself was speaking. "You have come to remember." Avon froze. The voice was both ancient and urgent, and it felt as if it was coming from everywhere at once. His heart raced, and he took a deep breath. "I don't understand," he said aloud, though he wasn't sure why. The voice had already answered his unspoken questions, and yet, he couldn't help himself. "What is this place? What is happening?" "The orchard is but a part of the whole," the voice replied. "It is a guardian, a keeper of memory. And you, Avon, are a part of that memory. You have been bound to this land since before your birth. You were chosen." Avon's pulse quickened, and he felt a wave of realization wash over him. "Chosen for what?" he asked, his voice tight with the weight of the words. "To remember," the voice answered. "To awaken what has been buried beneath the soil. To restore what was lost." Avon felt a chill run through him. What was lost? The earth beneath him seemed to pulse in response. The stones glowed brighter, their light blinding now. Avon's eyes narrowed, trying to hold onto the vision before him. And then, suddenly, the world around him shifted. The orchard faded away, replaced by a vision, a memory, perhaps, or a dream. He saw figures standing in the orchard, their faces indistinct but their movements fluid and graceful. The trees were younger, their branches reaching toward the sky, the light softer, warmer. He saw Myra, much younger, standing beside him. They were laughing, running through the orchard, their laughter mingling with the sound of the wind. But then, the vision began to fade. The figures blurred, their faces melting away, replaced by the image of a shadow, a dark figure standing in the distance, watching them. The vision shattered, and Avon stumbled backward, his heart racing. "No," he whispered, his voice breaking. What is this? What does it mean? The shadows are coming, the voice said, its tone cold. And when they arrive, the orchard will be no more. You must remember, Avon. You must restore what has been lost. The ground beneath his feet began to tremble again, the hum growing louder, filling his ears with its strange, otherworldly rhythm. The lights flickered, their glow dimming as the shadows crept in from the edges of the orchard, stretching across the ground like a cloak. Avon felt the weight of the past pressing down on him, the voices of those who had walked this land before him whispering in his ears. The orchard was waking. The secrets were being uncovered. And there was no turning back now. Myra's voice cut through the tension. Avon, she called, her voice distant but clear. It's time. Avon turned, his breath shallow, his eyes wide. Time for what? Time to face the truth, Myra said, stepping into the circle. Time to remember. Act 11, The Unveiling of Lost Memories. The morning sun pierced through the windows, casting long, slanted beams across the wooden floor of the house. Avon woke with a start, his mind racing from the dreams that had haunted him throughout the night. The same dreams of the orchard, the same whispers in the wind, and the same feeling of something unseen, something buried, calling to him. He sat up, rubbing his face, trying to ground himself in the present. His heart was still pounding from the visions he had seen in the stone circle the night before. The memory of the shadows, the dark figure watching from the distance, it all felt too real, too important to ignore. And yet, in his gut, Avon felt an undeniable pull to return. The orchard had chosen him, just as Myra had said. It had called him for a reason, and no matter how much he resisted, no matter how much he wanted to run from it, the truth was becoming impossible to escape. Downstairs, Myra was already awake, moving silently through the kitchen. The scent of freshly brewed tea filled the air, mingling with the faint fragrance of lavender and rosemary. Avon stood in the doorway for a moment, watching her as she worked. She seemed calm, but he could see the weight in her eyes, something that had shifted in her since the events of the night before. She turned to face him as he entered. "I'm glad you're awake," she said softly. "I didn't want to disturb you." Avon gave a small nod. "I haven't been sleeping much," he said, his voice rough from the remnants of his dreams. "The orchard? It's calling me, Myra. I don't know why, but I feel like I need to go back. To understand what's happening." Myra set down the teapot and walked over to him, her expression serious. "I knew this day would come. The orchard has always been a place of memory, a keeper of things lost, but it's also been a place of choice. And now, Avon, it's giving you the choice to remember. To know the truth." Avon's heart quickened. "The truth about what?" Myra sighed and gestured toward the window, where the orchard stood bathed in early morning light. There are things buried here, things that neither of us fully understands. You were born into this, Avon. This place, this land, it chose you, just like it chose your ancestors. Avon stared at the trees outside, their branches swaying gently in the breeze. I don't know what you mean. I don't remember anything from my past. How can I be a part of something that I have no connection to? Myra turned toward him, her eyes soft but filled with a quiet intensity. That's what we have to uncover. You weren't just born into this land, you were made for it. And the truth of who you are is locked in the orchard. It's in the stones, in the trees, in the soil beneath your feet. Avon shook his head, trying to make sense of her words. But how do we find it? How do I remember something that's been lost for so long? Myra reached into the pocket of her apron and pulled out a small, weathered key. She held it out to Avon, her eyes never leaving his. This key was given to me when I first arrived at the orchard, she said. I didn't understand it at the time, but now I know. It's for you. Avon took the key from her, turning it over in his hand. It was simple, nothing more than a small brass key with an intricate design carved into the handle. It felt cold against his skin, but as he held it, a strange warmth spread through his chest. Where does it go? Avon asked, his voice quiet. Myra smiled faintly. In the old house. There's a door, hidden away in the back. It hasn't been opened in years. Only a few of us know about it, but that's where the answers are. Avon felt his pulse quicken. The house. It's here. I thought it was just part of the orchard's history. Myra nodded. It's more than just a house. It's where the memories are stored, where the past is kept safe. But the door is locked for a reason. Not everyone is meant to open it. Avon felt a surge of determination. He had to know the truth. Whatever it was that the orchard had hidden from him, he needed to face it. I'll go, he said, his voice firm. I'll open the door. I need to know. Myra's eyes softened, and she placed a hand on his shoulder. I know you do. But be careful, Avon. The orchard reveals only what it thinks you're ready to see. And sometimes, the truth is more than you can bear. The two of them walked out of the house, their footsteps quiet on the grass as they made their way toward the old house at the far edge of the orchard. Avon's heart pounded in his chest as he approached the familiar structure. It had always been there, just beyond the trees, but it felt different now, as if it were more than just a house. It was a vessel for memories, a keeper of secrets. Myra led him around the back of the house, where an overgrown garden had once flourished. The door they stopped at was small, barely visible among the vines and moss that had crept over the years. The lock was old, rusted, but the key fit perfectly. With a click, the door swung open. Inside was dark, the air thick with dust. The smell of old wood and aged paper filled Avon's nostrils as he stepped over the threshold. His footsteps echoed in the silence, and the stillness felt unnatural, as though the house had been waiting for him to return. Myra stood back, her eyes never leaving him. "Go on," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "It's time." Avon moved through the small room, his heart racing. The walls were lined with shelves, old books, jars filled with strange objects, and papers scattered across the floor. But there was one thing that caught his eye, a large mirror, its surface covered in dust. It stood alone against the wall, framed in dark wood that had once been finely carved. As Avon moved closer, he saw that the mirror was not just reflecting his own image. Behind him, the surface rippled like water, showing scenes from the past, his past. He saw himself as a child, running through the orchard with Myra, laughing as the wind blew through the trees. He saw the day he had first arrived, the day the orchard had called him. And then, he saw something else. A shadow. A figure standing in the distance, watching him from the edge of the orchard. The same figure he had seen in his dreams. The same figure from the stone circle. Avon stumbled backward, his heart pounding in his chest. The mirror rippled again, the reflection shifting to show something darker, something more terrifying. The figure moved closer, its face becoming clearer. It was him. Or at least, it looked like him. The vision shattered, the mirror returning to its still, reflective surface. What was that? Avon gasped, his breath coming in shallow gasps. Myra stepped forward, her face pale. "That's the truth, Avon," she said quietly. "You are the keeper of the orchard's memory. You were chosen to carry its past, and now it's time for you to face it." Avon turned toward her, his mind spinning. But what does it mean? Why me? Myra's eyes were filled with sorrow. "Because you are the one who can restore it? The shadow, the figure, it's part of the story. And now, you must finish it." Act 12, Facing the Hidden Truth. The silence in the room was deafening, broken only by the soft rustling of the wind outside and the occasional creak of the old house settling. Avon stood before the mirror, his heart pounding in his chest, the reflection still flickering with strange images of his past. The shadow, the figure that looked like him, had come closer in the mirror, almost as if it were reaching out, urging him to step forward, to acknowledge the truth. His breath caught in his throat as he tried to process what he had just seen. The orchard, the lights, the pull in his chest, it was all connected to him. To his past. But what did it all mean? Why had the orchard chosen him? Myra's voice broke through his thoughts. "Avon, it's time to understand." He turned to her, his eyes wide with confusion and fear. "Understand what, Myra? What am I supposed to do with all of this?" She stepped forward, her face full of sorrow, as though she knew exactly what he was about to face. The orchard doesn't choose just anyone. It chooses those who are tied to it, those whose blood runs through its roots. Your family has always been connected to this land, Avon. And you, more than anyone else, are the key to unlocking its true power. Avon's mind raced, but he couldn't quite wrap his head around it. My family. I don't remember any of this. How could I be the key? Myra's gaze softened as she looked at him, her eyes filled with empathy. You were meant to forget, Avon. It was the only way for the orchard to survive, for its secrets to be kept safe. But now, the time has come for you to remember. Avon stepped back, shaking his head. I don't want to remember. I don't want to be part of this. The orchard, it's too much. Myra took a deep breath, as if preparing herself for what she was about to say next. You don't have a choice. It's already chosen you. You are the one who must restore what was lost. The shadow you saw in the mirror, the one who looked like you, he's a part of you. A part of your past, a part of this land. He's been waiting for you, Avon. Avon's head was spinning. He had always felt a strange connection to the orchard, but he never imagined it was this deep, this personal. The figure in the mirror himself was a mystery he couldn't ignore anymore. What did it mean? What was it trying to tell him? What do I have to do? Avon whispered, more to himself than to Myra. How do I restore what's lost? Myra reached out and gently touched his arm. You have to face what was buried, Avon. The orchard's memory is locked away in the earth, hidden beneath the roots. The stones, the lights, they're all part of it. The truth is here, waiting for you. But it won't come easily. The land won't let you in until you accept who you are. And who you were. Avon felt the weight of her words pressing down on him. Who was he? What was his connection to the orchard? He didn't know, but he knew one thing for certain, he couldn't leave now. The orchard had chosen him for a reason, and it was time to face whatever it had been hiding. The ground beneath his feet seemed to hum in response to his thoughts, a soft vibration that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. The earth was alive, aware, waiting for him to take the next step. And somehow, he knew that if he didn't, he would never understand the truth. He would never be free. I'll do it, Avon said, his voice steady. I'll face whatever's buried here. I'll face my past. Myra nodded, her expression both relieved and sad. You're braver than I thought, she said softly. But be careful, Avon. The orchard doesn't forgive easily. They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of what Avon had just agreed to settling over him like a heavy cloak. He didn't know what awaited him, but he felt a strange sense of determination rising within him. He couldn't run anymore. The orchard had been calling to him, and now, he would answer. Avon turned toward the window, his gaze fixed on the dark, still orchard. The trees seemed to be waiting for him, their branches bending as if to beckon him closer. The light was dimming now, the sun beginning to set, casting long shadows across the ground. But in that fading light, he saw the faintest glow, those same mysterious lights that had danced through the trees the night before. The orchard was waiting for him. "I'm ready," Avon said, his voice firm. Myra gave him a small, encouraging smile. "Then go. The answers are waiting for you." With a final look at Myra, Avon stepped out of the house and into the orchard. The air was thick with the scent of fruit and earth, and the ground beneath his feet felt alive, pulsing with an energy he couldn't explain. He moved through the trees, following the path that had always felt familiar, but now it seemed different, almost like a path that had been carved just for him. The further he walked, the more the orchard seemed to come alive. The leaves rustled in a rhythm that almost seemed like a whisper. The lights flickered in the distance, guiding him forward. It was as if the entire land was pulling him deeper, urging him to uncover what had been hidden for so long. He arrived at the stone circle once more, the place where it had all begun. The stones stood tall, their surfaces covered in moss, their shadows long in the fading light. The glow from the lights intensified, their soft, ethereal light illuminating the stones in an otherworldly glow. Avon stepped into the center of the circle, his heart pounding. He could feel the energy from the earth beneath him, a hum that resonated deep in his chest. The air around him seemed to thrum with life, the ground pulsing in time with the rhythm of his own heartbeat. Suddenly, the ground trembled beneath his feet. The stones began to glow brighter, and the hum intensified, filling his ears. Avon gasped, his heart racing. He felt something shift, something ancient deep beneath the surface of the earth. And then, the earth cracked open. A deep, low sound echoed through the orchard as a fissure appeared in the ground, just beneath his feet. From the crack, a faint, golden light began to pour out, growing brighter and brighter until it illuminated the entire stone circle. Avon stepped back, his breath catching in his throat. From the crack in the earth, a figure emerged. The figure was cloaked in shadow, its form indistinct, but its presence was overwhelming. The figure was tall, its movements slow but deliberate. And as it stepped closer, Avon realized something that made his heart skip a beat. It was him. The figure was him. The figure stopped just in front of him, its face now clear in the light. It was his face, his own features, but twisted, darkened. It was as if a part of him had been lost, and now it had come back to confront him. Avon's voice trembled as he spoke, barely above a whisper. "Who are you?" The figure's lips curled into a faint smile. "I am what you were meant to be." Avon's mind reeled, trying to process the words. "What do you mean? What happened to me?" The figure stepped closer, its eyes dark and filled with something that could only be described as hunger. "You were born of the orchard, Avon. You were created to carry its memories, to protect its secrets. But something went wrong. Something was lost. Avon stepped back, his mind racing. What went wrong? What are you saying? The figure's eyes darkened. You were never supposed to forget. But the orchard, it hid the truth. And now, it's time for you to remember. The ground trembled again, and the lights around them flared brighter, their glow reaching out toward Avon as if to pull him closer. This is the moment of reckoning, Avon, the figure said, its voice deep and resonant. The orchard has been waiting for you to remember. And now, it's time for you to decide what to do with the truth. Act 13, the final decision. Avon stood frozen, his heart pounding in his chest as the figure, his own face, loomed before him in the stone circle. The figure was taller, its eyes darker, its expression twisted with something that felt like regret, but also something more dangerous. The air around them buzzed with an electric tension, the lights of the orchard pulsing in the dark, as if waiting for him to make a move. You were meant to be the keeper of this place, Avon, the figure spoke, its voice low and resonant, echoing in the silent air. Born of the orchard, a guardian of its secrets. You were created to carry its memories, to protect it from those who would destroy it. But something went wrong. Avon's breath caught in his throat. He shook his head in disbelief, trying to back away, but the earth beneath him seemed to pull him forward, as if the ground itself were alive, beckoning him closer. No, Avon whispered. No, this isn't possible. I'm not a part of this. I don't even remember. The figure's lips curled into a bitter smile. You were supposed to remember. But the orchard, in its infinite wisdom, decided that you needed to forget. It hid the truth from you, Avon, as it has done with many before you. Avon's mind spun, his thoughts racing. Why? Why me? Why this place? The figure stepped forward, its shadow stretching across the stone circle. Because you were born of it? Your blood is tied to the orchard's roots. The orchard's memory flows through your veins. The land chose you to carry its burden. Avon stumbled back, his hand instinctively reaching for the key that Myra had given him. He could feel the weight of it in his pocket, as though it were pulling him back toward the mirror in the house, to the door that held all the answers. But the words of the figure echoed in his ears, filling him with doubt and fear. You say the orchard chose me, Avon said, his voice shaking, but I didn't ask for this. I didn't ask for any of this. The figure's gaze softened for a moment, but only briefly. You didn't ask for it, no. But the orchard knew you would come. And now, you must decide. Avon took another step back, his heart racing as the lights around the stone circle flickered wildly. Decide what? What do you want from me? The figure's voice grew darker, colder. The orchard is dying, Avon. The land is growing weak. The cycle of memory is breaking. It needs someone to restore it, someone to reclaim the past. If you refuse, the land will wither, and everything it has ever been will be lost. Avon's breath hitched as the weight of the figure's words settled in his chest. The orchard. Dying. What did that mean? What was he supposed to do? The truth has been buried here for centuries, the figure continued, and it has been waiting for someone to unlock it. To open the door and set the memory free. And now, it is your turn. Avon stood still, his mind racing as he tried to process everything the figure had said. The orchard wasn't just a place of beauty and peace. It was something more. It was alive with secrets, memories of the past, things that had been hidden away for centuries. And he was somehow tied to it all. But how could he restore it? How could he face something that had been buried so deeply? The air around him seemed to grow heavier as the ground beneath him rumbled again. The orchard was calling to him, pulling him towards something he wasn't sure he was ready to face. You have a choice, Avon, the figure said softly, his voice almost sympathetic. You can walk away. Leave this place behind and forget everything. You can return to the life you've known, and the orchard will fade into nothingness. Avon's heart skipped a beat. The thought of walking away, of leaving all of this behind, seemed so tempting. So easy. The truth of the orchard, the weight of its history, was more than he had ever imagined. Could he really face it? But then the figure's eyes darkened, and his voice grew cold. But know this, if you leave, the orchard will never call again. The memory will fade, and the past will be lost. Forever. Avon's breath caught in his throat as the weight of the figure's words sank in. The orchard. The memory. It would all be gone if he walked away. He could never undo it. He could never return to this place. But could he bear the burden of its secrets? Could he live with the knowledge that the past had been buried here for so long, waiting for someone to uncover it? You must decide now, the figure said, his voice final. The orchard is dying. It needs you to restore it, to remember what was lost. If you are not the one to do it, the cycle will end. And everything, the orchard, the land, the memory, will fade into oblivion. Avon closed his eyes, feeling the weight of the decision pressing down on him. His mind was spinning, his heart was racing. He had never imagined that the orchard, this place that had seemed so peaceful and calming, could hold such dark secrets. But he was a part of it. Whether he wanted to be or not, he was tied to this place, to its past, to its future. He opened his eyes, and his gaze locked with the figure's. I won't let it die, he said, his voice steady. I will restore the orchard. I will face whatever it takes. The figure's lips twisted into a grim smile, and the ground beneath them began to rumble. The stones in the circle began to glow, their light intensifying until the entire orchard was bathed in a brilliant glow. "You have made the right choice, Avon," the figure said, his voice fading into the hum of the earth. "The orchard will remember you." Suddenly, the ground cracked open beneath Avon's feet, and a flood of light burst forth from the fissure. The light poured into the stone circle, swirling around Avon as the earth trembled beneath him. The trees began to sway, their branches stretching toward the sky as if they were reaching for something ancient. The air hummed with energy, and Avon felt the earth beneath him pulse with life. The orchard had chosen him, and now, it was giving him everything he needed to restore what had been lost. The vision of the shadowy figure, the mysterious memories, the deep, buried past, all of it was flooding his mind. The orchard's truth was finally being revealed to him. Avon's body trembled as he absorbed the knowledge, the history, the memory of the orchard. It was overwhelming, yet strangely familiar, like a piece of him he had forgotten. With the final burst of light, the vision faded, and Avon found himself standing alone in the stone circle. The orchard was still, silent once more. The trees no longer swayed, and the air had returned to its peaceful, natural rhythm. But Avon knew that nothing would ever be the same again. He had made his choice. And now, the orchard's memory had been restored. Myra appeared at the edge of the circle, her eyes filled with both relief and sadness. She stepped forward, her voice quiet. "You've done it, Avon. The orchard's truth has been revealed. It's time to leave." Avon turned to her, his expression somber but resolute. "I can't leave it. Not now. I've seen it. The past. The memory. I have to protect it. I have to remember it." Myra nodded slowly, her gaze softening. "I knew you would." Avon turned back to the orchard, the trees now bathed in the soft light of the setting sun. The orchard had given him everything it had to offer: its truth, its history, its memory. And now, it was up to him to carry that knowledge forward, to ensure that the land and its secrets would never be forgotten again. Act 14, The Keeper of the Orchard. Avon stood alone in the stone circle, the air around him still vibrating with the energy that had just surged through him. The orchard was quiet now, almost eerily so, the branches of the trees casting long shadows in the fading light of the day. He could feel the weight of everything settling in, the responsibility, the power, the knowledge that had been unlocked. The orchard had chosen him. The land had spoken, and now it was up to him to protect it, to restore what had been lost, and to ensure that the memory of the past remained alive. The past that had been buried deep beneath the roots, the secrets that had been forgotten, the dark figure that had haunted him, everything was now clear. He was the keeper. Myra appeared at the edge of the circle, her face solemn but proud. She had been watching, waiting for him to make his decision. Avon had always known that he wasn't alone in this. Myra, the orchard, the land, it had all been guiding him, nudging him toward this moment. "You did it, "Avon," she said, her voice gentle. "The orchid's memory has been restored. You've unlocked it, brought it back." Avon turned to face her, his expression firm but filled with a sense of finality. It wasn't just about unlocking it. It was about remembering who I am, what I'm meant to do. Myra smiled faintly, stepping closer to him. "You're the keeper now. You carry the memory of the orchard, the truth of this place. You protect it." Avon's heart was heavy, but in the same breath, it felt light, like a weight had been lifted, but in its place was something more powerful, more enduring. The orchard wasn't just a place. It was a living, breathing entity, a part of him, a part of the land. And he was now a part of it, its memories intertwined with his own. But even though the past had been restored, Avon knew that the future was still uncertain. The shadow that had been with him, the dark figure, it wasn't gone. It had been a part of the orchard's history, and it still lingered, somewhere in the corners of the land, waiting for the right moment to return. "We can't stop here," Avon said, his voice steady. "The orchard is safe for now, but the cycle isn't finished. There are still things we don't understand. Things I need to learn." Myra's expression darkened, her eyes searching his face. "You're right. There are things buried in the land, things that need to stay buried. But you're strong, Avon. You've proven that. You've restored the memory. Now, you must protect it." Avon took a deep breath, the weight of her words sinking in. He had restored the orchard's memory, but the responsibility didn't end there. He had to ensure that the truth was not forgotten again, that the cycle would not repeat itself. He had to protect the land, its past, and its future. "I'll do whatever it takes," Avon said, his voice filled with conviction. Myra nodded, her gaze softening. "I know you will. But remember, Avon, the orchard doesn't just give its power. It demands a price. It's not just about keeping the memory alive. It's about keeping balance." "Balance?" Avon repeated, confused. "Yes," Myra said, her eyes locking onto his. "The orchard's power can be a double-edged sword. It can restore, but it can also destroy. The memories you've unlocked, they're not all good. Some of them are dangerous. Some of them want to be forgotten for a reason." Avon felt a chill run down his spine. "What do you mean? What's buried here that's so dangerous?" Myra took a step back, her gaze distant. "There are things in this land that the orchard itself is afraid of. Dark forces. Things that were sealed away long ago. The orchard's memory is not just about what's been lost. It's also about what's been hidden." Avon's mind raced. The shadows. The dark figure. The secrets of the orchard. Was this just the beginning? Had he made the right choice, or had he unlocked something he wasn't ready to handle? The ground beneath them suddenly rumbled, breaking Avon from his thoughts. The earth trembled, and the trees around them seemed to groan, as if awakening from a deep slumber. The lights in the orchard flared again, brighter than before, swirling in the air like they were alive. Avon turned to Myra, his heart pounding. What's happening? What did I wake up? Myra's face turned pale, and she looked toward the trees with a mix of fear and resignation. This is it. The balance is shifting. The orchard is waking, but something else is stirring with it. Before Avon could react, the ground cracked open once more, a deep fissure running through the earth in front of him. From the crack, a dark, shadowy figure began to emerge, its form shifting like smoke, swirling around the edges of the stone circle. It was the same figure that had appeared in the mirror, the dark figure with Avon's face. But now, it was different. It was stronger, more powerful. Its presence filled the air with a sense of dread. Avon stepped forward, his heart racing. No. I won't let you destroy this. The figure laughed, its voice hollow and mocking. You think you can stop me? You are nothing but a part of the orchard's memory, Avon. You are my creation. You cannot escape your own past. Avon's pulse quickened as the figure moved closer, its form flickering like smoke in the wind. The lights around the stone circle flickered and dimmed, as if the orchard itself was afraid of the figure's power. No, Avon said, his voice steady but filled with resolve. I am not you. I am not a part of what you've become. I've chosen my path, and I won't let you destroy everything I've worked for. The figure's form shimmered, its dark eyes narrowing. You cannot fight what is inside you, Avon. You cannot escape the shadows. The air around them crackled with energy, and Avon could feel the pull of the figure, its dark energy threatening to consume him. But he stood firm, drawing on the power of the orchard, the memories that had been unlocked within him. He was the keeper now. He was the one who had restored the balance. And he would not let the orchard be destroyed. With a final, defiant step, Avon raised his hand, calling on the power of the orchard. The ground beneath him trembled as the light from the trees flared once more, bright and pure. The figure recoiled, its form flickering as the light grew stronger, brighter. You will not win, Avon said, his voice strong. I am the keeper. And this orchard will not fall. With a final surge of energy, Avon focused all his power into the ground beneath him. The earth cracked open, but this time, it wasn't with darkness, it was with light. The shadows were pushed back, their form dissipating as the light from the orchard filled the space. The figure howled in frustration, its form dissolving into the wind, until it was nothing but a distant memory, lost once more in the past. Avon stood, breathing heavily, his heart still racing. The orchard was safe, but he knew this was not the end. The balance had been restored, but the land was changed. And he, too, had changed. He was no longer just a man, he was a keeper, a protector of the orchard's memories. And now, the orchard had chosen him not just to remember, but to protect, to ensure that its secrets were never forgotten again. Myra stepped forward, her face full of pride and relief. "You did it, Avon. The orchard is safe. But remember, the past is always with you. You can never truly escape it." Avon nodded, his gaze fixed on the trees in the distance, their branches swaying gently in the wind. He had made his choice. And now, he would live with it for as long as the orchard called to him. Act 15, The Keeper's Burden. The air around the orchard had shifted again. The eerie calm that had settled after the confrontation with the dark figure was now replaced by a palpable tension. The trees, though still and silent, seemed to stand taller, their branches stretching toward the sky as if they, too, were waiting for something. The ground beneath Avon's feet still hummed with the residual energy of the battle, and he could feel it, thrumming in his chest, like the heartbeat of the land itself. Myra stood beside him, her gaze scanning the trees as if she, too, could feel the change. Her face was solemn, her eyes distant. The power that had surged through the orchard, the power that had been unlocked and restored, was a heavy burden, one that Avon had only just begun to understand. "You've done it," Myra said softly, her voice carrying the weight of both pride and worry. "The orchard is safe. For now." Avon nodded, his eyes fixed on the horizon, where the last traces of sunlight were fading into the night. He had made his choice. He had embraced his role as the keeper, and now the responsibility weighed on him like a cloak he could never remove. "The orchard's memory is restored," he said, his voice steady but filled with uncertainty. "But I can feel it, something is still missing. Something isn't finished." Myra's eyes softened. "The balance is delicate, Avon. You've restored the orchard's memory, but the land still carries the echoes of what happened before. The shadows may be gone for now, but they're not fully defeated. They're waiting for the right time to return." Avon's gaze drifted back to the stone circle, where the ground had cracked and the light had surged. The memory of the dark figure, the one who had looked like him, lingered in his mind. It had been a reflection of something Avon had never fully understood, the dark part of himself, a part of the orchard's history that had been buried and forgotten. But now, the orchard had been restored, and with it came the knowledge that the past could never truly be erased. The shadows would return, but he had to be ready to face them. The truth was that the orchard was not just a place of beauty and tranquility. It was a place of power, of ancient forces that were both destructive and protective. "I feel like I'm walking on the edge of something," Avon said, his voice tight with the weight of his realization. "The orchard's power, its memory, it's alive, Myra. It's more than just a place. It's both alive and ancient," Myra agreed, her gaze distant. "The orchard has always been more than just trees and fruit. It's the heart of this land, the keeper of its history, its soul. And now, you are its protector." Avon felt the gravity of her words. But what if I fail? What if I can't protect it? You won't fail, Myra said, her voice firm. You've already proven yourself, Avon. The orchard chose you because it knows you. You are part of its memory, part of its future. The land will always test you, but you're stronger than you think. Avon turned to her, his gaze uncertain. But I don't know everything. I don't know what's still out there, what's still hidden. Myra placed a hand on his shoulder. The truth is, Avon, none of us ever truly know everything. But you have something most people don't, the power of the orchard's memory. And you have me. We'll face it together. Avon's heart calmed slightly, though the weight of the responsibility still lingered. He couldn't help but wonder what the future held for him and for the orchard. He had already faced so much, yet he knew this was only the beginning. The land was awakening, and its secrets were vast, stretching back centuries. He had unlocked the first layers of its memory, but what lay deeper beneath the soil? What would he find when he dug further? The orchard had been restored, but Avon had the distinct feeling that the true test was yet to come. As the night fell, the stars above twinkled in the clear sky, casting their light over the orchard. The air was crisp, and the sounds of the land, the chirping of crickets, the rustling of leaves seemed almost too peaceful, too serene. Yet beneath that calm surface, Avon knew the orchard was still alive, still watching, waiting. We should go back to the house, Myra said, breaking the silence. Rest. You'll need your strength for what's to come. Avon nodded, but as he turned toward the house, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The land still felt unsettled, like it was holding its breath, waiting for the next shift. The orchard had been restored, but it wasn't whole. Not yet. Inside the house, the warmth from the hearth wrapped around him like a blanket. The fire crackled in the corner, casting flickering shadows on the walls. Avon sat down at the table, his mind racing. The memories of the orchard, the confrontation with the dark figure, and the overwhelming power that had surged through the land, it all swirled in his mind, making it hard to think clearly. Myra sat across from him, watching him carefully. You're thinking too much. You've done what you needed to do. I don't know if I've done enough, Avon said, his voice low. I can feel it. The darkness, it's not gone. It's still out there, waiting. Myra sighed, her expression softening. The darkness may never truly leave. But the orchard has a way of protecting itself, Avon. It has its own balance. And you are a part of that balance now. Avon ran his hand through his hair, still unsure of what to do next. The orchard had chosen him, and now it was his responsibility to protect it. But the weight of that responsibility was heavier than he had imagined. It wasn't just about restoring the memory, it was about keeping the balance, ensuring the orchard didn't fall into the same darkness it had once faced. I'm not sure I'm ready, Avon admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. What if I fail? Myra looked at him, her eyes steady and reassuring. You won't fail. You've already done what was needed. But remember, Avon, you don't have to do this alone. The orchard will guide you. And I will be with you, every step of the way. Avon nodded, his heart still heavy, but now with a sense of resolve. The orchard had chosen him, and he would carry its burden. He would protect its memory, its past, its future. Whatever came next, he would face it with the strength he had found within himself. As the night wore on, the fire crackled softly, and the world outside seemed to settle into a peaceful lull. The orchard, too, seemed to rest, as if it were waiting for the dawn to break and for the next chapter of its story to begin. But Avon knew one thing for certain, this was only the beginning. The orchard had awakened, and with it, so had he. Act 16, a new light, an unshakable fear. The morning dawned bright and clear, but the air felt thick with unspoken questions. Avon stood in the kitchen, his fingers tracing the rim of a mug, his eyes distant as he stared out the window. The orchard lay before him, bathed in soft sunlight, but despite the beauty of the day, an unsettling tension hung in the air. The night had been long, and sleep had eluded him once again. His mind had been filled with flashes of memories not entirely his own, but his by the nature of his connection to the orchard. The dark figure, the one that had looked like him, had haunted his thoughts, its presence lingering like a shadow just beyond his reach. The memory was clear now, more than ever before, but what it meant remained a mystery. Morning, Myra's voice broke through his thoughts. She stepped into the kitchen, her expression unreadable, as always, but there was something different in the way she held herself. A sense of worry, perhaps, or a weight that had settled onto her shoulders. Avon noticed it immediately, and it stirred something in him. Morning, he replied, his voice thick with the remnants of his sleepless night. He didn't turn around, but he could feel Myra's gaze on him as she poured herself a cup of tea. Did you sleep? She asked gently, her voice filled with the same quiet concern that he had heard in her words last night. Avon shook his head. Not really. It's hard to rest after everything that's happened. I keep seeing that figure, the one in the mirror. It doesn't make sense, Myra. Why does it look like me? Myra took a sip of her tea, her eyes scanning the orchard beyond the window. It's a reflection of something you've yet to understand. The orchard doesn't just preserve memory, it preserves truths. And sometimes, those truths aren't easy to face. Avon clenched his fists at his sides. I don't know what that means. I'm just trying to make sense of it. I restored the memory. The orchard is alive again. But there's still this thing hanging over me. The figure. The shadow. You've always known that the orchard wasn't just a place of peace, Avon, Myra said softly, placing her mug down on the table. It's a place of power. And power isn't always gentle. It tests you. It forces you to confront the parts of yourself that you'd rather leave buried. Avon turned to face her, his gaze sharp. I don't want to confront it. I want to understand it. I have to understand what that shadow is, what it means for me. Myra's expression softened. I know. But remember, the orchid's power isn't just about memories, it's about balance. And with balance comes responsibility. Avon frowned. Responsibility. For what? For keeping the balance of this land, Avon. The past, the present, the future, they're all intertwined. And now that you've unlocked its memories, you have a role in keeping that balance intact. You are the keeper. The word keeper echoed in Avon's mind. It felt heavy, like an anchor tying him to a reality he wasn't ready to accept. He had never asked for this role. He had never asked to be tied to the orchard, to its memory, to its secrets. And yet, here he was, holding the weight of its past and future on his shoulders. I don't even know what I'm supposed to do with this responsibility, Avon muttered, his voice thick with frustration. How do I protect something that I don't fully understand? The orchard. It's full of so much power, so much history. I can't control it. Myra's eyes met his. No one can control the orchard, Avon. Not fully. But that's the point. It's not about control, it's about understanding, about listening to the land and the power it holds. The balance is fragile, and the shadows you've seen are only a part of it. Avon's heart skipped a beat. What do you mean, the shadows? Is there something still out there? Myra's expression turned somber. There are always shadows in places of power. But the darker ones are not just born from the land, they're born from those who walk on it. The orchard's memory, the power it holds, it tests you, Avon. It's asking you to face something within yourself. The weight of her words sank in, and for a moment, Avon stood in silence, processing what she had said. The orchard had chosen him, yes, but it wasn't just calling him to protect it. It was calling him to transform, to become something more than he had ever been. But at what cost? He had already faced the shadow of the figure, the darkness that mirrored him, and yet something told him that the true test was still to come. That the shadow was not just an external force, but a reflection of something he had yet to understand about himself. Avon. Myra's voice was gentle, but there was a note of urgency in it now. There's something I haven't told you. Something you need to know. Avon turned toward her, his heart suddenly pounding. What is it? Myra took a deep breath, her eyes filled with the weight of an unspoken truth. The orchard, its power, it's tied to something older than you know. Something ancient. The figure you saw in the mirror. It's part of the orchard's history, part of its cycle. The orchard has been here long before you, long before your family. And it's been waiting for you. For someone to carry its burden. Avon's mind reeled with the implications of her words. Waiting for me. Yes, Myra said softly. Waiting for someone to take on the role of keeper. Someone who could understand the balance between memory and power. But there's another part of the orchard's history that's been buried. It's a part of your history, Avon. My history. Avon repeated, his voice thick with confusion. What does that mean? Myra hesitated, as if weighing whether to reveal the truth. Your family, Avon. They've always been a part of this land, a part of the orchard's memory. And so are you. But your connection to it runs deeper than you realize. You've been marked by the orchard's power, and it's something that cannot be undone. Avon stepped back, his mind spinning. Marked. What are you talking about? Myra's gaze was steady. The orchard's power is not just something you inherited, it's something that chose you. And now, you must decide what you'll do with that power. The weight of her words hit him like a physical blow. He was marked. The orchard had chosen him. And now, his role as keeper was not just about restoring the balance, it was about guarding the orchard, understanding its history, and confronting the parts of himself that he had tried to bury. He didn't know if he was ready for that. But as the land around him hummed with ancient energy, he knew that the time for questions was over. The orchard was alive, and so was he. His role was set. His purpose was clear. And the shadows, whatever they were, would always be a part of that purpose. I'll do whatever it takes, Avon said, his voice steady now, filled with a sense of resolve. I'll protect the orchard. I'll keep the balance. Myra nodded, her eyes soft but filled with pride. I know you will, Avon. And I'll be here, as long as you need me. We face this together. The orchard stood before them, its trees stretching toward the sky, its power waiting to be understood, its secrets waiting to be uncovered. Avon had made his choice. And now, with Myra by his side, he would face whatever came next, whatever challenges, whatever shadows lay ahead. He was ready. Act 17, a great shift, fire and shadows. The sun had barely risen, and already, the orchard was awake. The wind stirred the leaves in a pattern that seemed almost deliberate, as though the land itself were breathing, sighing, waiting for something. The trees stood still in the early light, their branches stretching upward, but their shadows stretched out longer, darker, almost as if they were reaching for something or someone. Avon stood at the edge of the orchard, his gaze fixed on the farthest trees. The air felt thick with energy, and for the first time since he had taken the role of keeper, he felt something he couldn't quite explain. A pull. a tug. As if the orchard itself were calling to him, urging him to step forward, deeper into the heart of its mysteries. He had embraced his duty as keeper. He had unlocked its memories, restored its balance, but the work wasn't done. Not by a long shot. The orchard's power ran deeper than even he had realized, and it was now up to him to understand it fully. To protect it, not just from external threats, but from the shadows that lingered beneath its surface, waiting for the right moment to strike. "You're up early," Myra's voice broke through his thoughts. She had been quiet, almost too quiet these past few days. Avon had noticed the change in her, the way her eyes lingered on the orchard, the way she seemed to be waiting for something. As if there were something she, too, could feel stirring beneath the soil. Avon turned to face her. "I couldn't sleep. Something's different today. I can feel it." Myra nodded, her expression thoughtful. "I feel it, too. The land is restless. And with it, so are you." Avon frowned. "What do you mean?" She stepped forward, her eyes locking onto his. "The orchard has been awakened, Avon. But with that awakening comes change. It's not just about keeping the balance anymore. It's about controlling the power that's been unlocked. And there's something darker beneath the surface, something that the orchard has kept hidden for a long time." Avon's heart skipped a beat. He had been preparing for the possibility of external threats, but this was different. Darker. More personal. "What is it?" he asked, his voice low. "What's beneath the surface?" Myra hesitated, her gaze shifting toward the trees. "The shadows. They've always been there. Part of the orchard's history. They are the memory of the land's darker days. When the orchard was forced to defend itself from something far worse than we've ever imagined." Avon's mind raced, trying to make sense of Myra's words. "What are these shadows? What happened here?" Myra took a deep breath, her voice steady but heavy with the weight of unspoken truths. "Long before the orchard became what it is today, it was a place of great power that could create or destroy. The shadows are remnants of that power. They were sealed away, buried deep beneath the earth, in the very soil that feeds the trees. But now, with the orchard awakened, the shadows are stirring again." Avon swallowed hard. "And you think they're coming for us?" "They're already here," Myra said softly. "In a way, they never left. But now, they're more dangerous. The balance that you've restored, it's fragile. The shadows are testing it, pushing against it. And if they break through, they could destroy everything." Avon felt a chill run down his spine. The shadows, the darkness that Myra spoke of, had always been something he couldn't see, something he couldn't understand. But now, it was all becoming too real. The orchard had been more than just a peaceful retreat, it was a battleground, a place where light and dark had clashed for centuries, and the scars of that battle were still hidden in its roots. "I have to stop them," Avon said, his voice firm. "I can't let them take over." Myra stepped closer, her hand resting lightly on his arm. "It's not just about stopping them, Avon. It's about understanding why they're here, what they want. The shadows aren't just a force of destruction. They're a part of the orchard's past. They're a part of you." Avon turned to her, confusion written all over his face. "What do you mean, they're a part of me?" Myra's eyes were dark, haunted. "You're the keeper, Avon. And the orchard's power flows through you. But there's a reason you were chosen. You carry the memories of both light and dark. The shadows are your inheritance." Avon's mind spun. He had known that the orchard's power was vast, that it held secrets buried deep beneath the earth, but he hadn't known that he was connected to it in this way. That the shadows were part of him, tied to his very being. "I don't understand," he whispered, the weight of her words crashing over him. "I'm part of this. The darkness. It's inside me." "Yes," Myra said quietly. "The shadows are a reflection of your past, of what you were meant to become. And now, they are testing you. They will push you to your limits, to see if you can control them, or if they will control you." Avon stepped back, his breath coming faster now. The idea that the darkness, the shadows, were a part of him, he didn't know if he was ready to accept that. It felt like a betrayal, like something inside of him was being forced to the surface, something he had spent his whole life trying to suppress. "I don't want this," he said, his voice hoarse. "I didn't ask for this." Myra's gaze softened. "None of us do, Avon. But it's not about wanting or not wanting. It's about accepting what you are, and using that power to protect what matters. The orchard's balance depends on you. And the darkness. It's your responsibility to face it." Avon stood still, his mind racing. The weight of his new role, the responsibility of being the keeper, had always felt heavy, but now it felt impossible. He wasn't just the protector of the orchard's memory, he was the keeper of its light and dark. He had to face the shadows inside him, and in the orchard itself, if he was going to protect the balance. "How do I face it?" he asked, his voice trembling. "How do I control it?" "You already have," Myra said, her voice soft. "The fact that you're here, standing in this moment, shows that you've already taken the first step. Now, you just have to embrace what's inside you. The shadows aren't your enemy, Avon. They're part of the land. Part of you." The orchard seemed to pulse in response to her words, the trees swaying gently as if they were listening, waiting. Avon closed his eyes, taking a deep breath. The wind had picked up, swirling through the branches, carrying with it a sense of urgency. The shadows were waiting for him. They were already here, and if he didn't face them now, they would consume him. "I'm ready," he said, his voice steady, though his heart still raced in his chest. "I'll face them. I'll control it." Myra nodded, her gaze filled with a mixture of pride and sorrow. "You don't control the shadows, Avon. You learn to live with them. They are part of you. And now, you must find the balance between light and dark." Avon turned back to the orchard, his heart pounding. The shadows in the distance were growing longer, stretching toward him as if they were reaching out, calling him forward. He could feel the pull of them, the weight of their presence. He stepped forward, his footsteps slow but resolute. The orchard had awakened, and with it, so had the darkness. But this time, he would not run from it. He would face it, and with every step, he would embrace the power that lay within him. As he walked deeper into the orchard, the air grew colder. The trees seemed to bend toward him, their branches casting long shadows that stretched out like fingers. The ground beneath his feet hummed with energy, and Avon felt the presence of something ancient, something deep beneath the soil, calling to him. The darkness was here. And this time, he was ready. Act 18, Confronting the Darkness, a step into the unconscious realm. The night had fallen, and with it, a heavy silence enveloped the orchard. The wind that had once whispered through the leaves now lay still, as if even nature itself was holding its breath. The trees, though towering and ancient, seemed to bend slightly as if they, too, were listening to the pulse of the land. The ground beneath Avon's feet felt different tonight. It was alive with a quiet, powerful hum, as though the orchard itself was calling to him, urging him to step deeper into its mysteries. He had already walked this path many times, but tonight was different. Tonight, the shadows were no longer just a distant threat. They were here. He could feel them moving, shifting beneath the earth, just out of sight. The darkness was closer now than ever before, and with every step he took toward the heart of the orchard, he could feel its weight pressing on him. Avon had always known the orchard held more than just beauty. It was a place of power, a place where light and dark existed in balance, but tonight, that balance was beginning to shift. The air was thick with tension, the kind of tension that only comes when something ancient, something buried, begins to stir. He had come to terms with his role as keeper, but this was different. The shadows weren't just a part of the orchard's past. They were a part of him, and they were awakening. The figure that had haunted his dreams, the one that mirrored his own image, was not just an illusion. It was a manifestation of something deeper, something older, that resided within the orchard and within him. Avon stopped in the middle of the orchard, his breath shallow, his heart racing. The shadows were everywhere now, swirling around him, stretching out like tendrils. They weren't just lurking in the dark corners of the land, they were rising, pushing against the earth, testing the boundaries of the orchard. He could feel the pull of the darkness, the way it called to him, beckoning him closer. It was a sensation he had felt before, but now it was stronger, more urgent. The shadows were alive, aware of him, and they were waiting for him to make the next move. "You've come," a voice echoed in his mind, low and haunting, like the murmur of the wind through the trees. It was a voice he recognized, one that had spoken to him in his dreams. "You've come to face what you've been hiding from." Avon clenched his fists, his eyes scanning the darkness. "I'm not hiding from anything," he said, his voice steady but filled with uncertainty. "I'm here to face it. To understand it." The shadows stirred around him, their movements fluid and unnatural, as if they were part of the very air he breathed. The figure, the dark reflection of himself, appeared in the distance, its form shimmering like smoke, flickering in and out of view. "You think you understand it?" the figure asked, its voice dripping with disdain. "You think you can control the darkness inside you? It's a part of you, Avon. It always has been." Avon's heart pounded in his chest. The figure was right. The darkness was a part of him, a part of the orchid's legacy that he could never escape. It was buried deep within the land, and it was buried deep within him as well. But he had to confront it. He had no choice. "I'm not afraid of you," Avon said, his voice stronger now, though doubt still gnawed at the edges of his thoughts. "I'm not afraid of what's inside me." The figure smiled, its eyes glowing with an unnatural light. "You should be." Without warning, the ground beneath Avon's feet shifted, the earth cracking open like a mouth, threatening to swallow him whole. The shadows rose up, thick and suffocating, wrapping around him like a blanket, pressing in from all sides. Avon gasped, struggling to breathe as the darkness enveloped him. He could feel the weight of it, the suffocating presence that seemed to crush him from all sides. It wasn't just the land anymore, it was him, his fears, his doubts, his past, all rising up to consume him. "You are the shadow," the figure's voice echoed, louder now, reverberating in his mind. "The darkness you seek to control is already inside you. It's been with you since the beginning, and it will never leave." Avon struggled to break free from the shadows, but it felt like an impossible task. His legs were heavy, his body slow, as if the darkness itself were holding him in place, refusing to let him move. "I am not you," Avon shouted, his voice strained as he tried to push back against the suffocating force. "I will not become you." The figure laughed, its voice low and mocking. "You already have, Avon. You already are me. You've always been a part of the orchid's darkness. And now, you must choose. Will you embrace the shadow within you, or will you let it consume you?" The ground beneath him trembled, and Avon could feel the energy of the orchard pulsing through him, the power that had once restored the land now fighting against the shadows. The struggle was not just external. It was internal, a battle between light and dark, between his own fears and his own strength. Avon's heart raced as he realized what he had to do. He couldn't run from the darkness. He couldn't pretend it wasn't a part of him. The only way to move forward was to accept it. He had to face it, confront it head on, and use its power not to control it, but to coexist with it. "I am not you," Avon repeated, his voice now filled with a quiet strength. "But I won't run from what I am. I will face the darkness." As he spoke those words, the shadows around him seemed to recoil, the pressure loosening just slightly. He could feel the energy of the orchard growing stronger within him, and for the first time, he truly understood what it meant to be the keeper. The darkness, the shadow, was a part of the land, and it was a part of him. But it didn't control him. With a surge of energy, Avon focused all his power on the ground beneath him. The light from the orchard flared, pushing the shadows back, the light and dark battling for control of the land. Avon closed his eyes, summoning the strength within himself to hold the balance. The earth trembled beneath him as the darkness began to recede, its form shifting and dissipating into the wind. The figure that had mirrored him, his own dark reflection, faded into the night, leaving Avon standing alone in the heart of the orchard. The wind picked up, the trees swaying gently as if to welcome him back. The shadows were still there, but they were no longer a threat. Avon had faced them. He had accepted them. And now, he was free. Myra appeared beside him, her eyes filled with understanding. "You've done it," she said softly. "You've faced the darkness inside you and inside the orchard. The balance is restored." Avon turned to her, his chest rising and falling with heavy breaths. "It's not over, is it?" Myra shook her head. "No. But you've taken the first step. And that's the hardest part." Avon looked out over the orchard, the sun now fully risen, its light spreading across the land. The shadows were gone for now, but the land was still alive, still full of secrets waiting to be uncovered. He was the keeper, and it was his duty to protect this balance, to keep the orchard safe. But for the first time, he felt ready. Act 19, opening a new door. The battle isn't over. The sun had risen high above the orchard, casting golden rays across the land, but there was an unease in the air that could not be ignored. Avon stood at the edge of the orchard, his eyes scanning the horizon where the trees stretched out before him. The peace that had followed the confrontation with the shadows had been short-lived. The land felt heavy, as though something or someone was waiting, watching, ready to make its move. The orchard was alive with power, but that power was fragile. Avon could feel the balance shift with every passing moment. The darkness had receded for now, but it had left behind a lingering presence, a reminder that the struggle for control was far from over. He had accepted his role as the keeper, and now, it was time to protect the orchard, its memories, its power. But protecting it was not as simple as just keeping the shadows at bay. There were forces at work in the land that he had yet to understand, and those forces were not all bound by the rules of balance. Myra had been quiet for the past few days, her thoughts clearly preoccupied. She, too, could feel the shift in the air, The unease had settled into her bones, and Avon had seen the way her eyes would flicker to the trees, as if expecting something to emerge from the shadows once again. "Avon," she said, her voice breaking the silence between them. "We need to talk." He turned to face her, concern flickering in his chest. "What's going on?" Myra stepped closer, her eyes filled with a mixture of caution and urgency. "The orchard. It's not the only thing that's been affected by your awakening." Avon raised an eyebrow, his pulse quickening. "What do you mean?" "The shadows," Myra continued, her voice low. "They weren't just a part of the orchard's memory. They were part of something older. Something bigger. And with your awakening, they've been set loose. Not just here, in the orchard, but in the world beyond." Avon's heart sank. "You mean they're spreading?" Myra nodded grimly. "Yes. The darkness isn't confined to the orchard anymore. It's reaching out, touching everything it can. And if we don't stop it, it will consume everything. The land, the people, the memories, it will all be wiped away." Avon felt a chill run down his spine. The shadows, the darkness, had always felt like an external threat. Something that could be fought off, contained. But now, Myra was telling him that they had a much larger reach. They were spreading, infecting the world beyond the orchard. And if they were allowed to grow, they could unravel everything he had worked for. "We need to act fast," Avon said, determination hardening in his voice. "What do we do?" Myra's gaze hardened. "We have to find the source. The shadows didn't just appear on their own. They were summoned, Avon. And whoever or whatever summoned them is still out there, lurking in the shadows." Avon clenched his fists, the weight of his responsibility pressing down on him. "We need to find them, before it's too late." Myra nodded. "I agree. But you can't do this alone. The shadows are too powerful. They're not just an enemy. They're a force. And we need to understand what we're dealing with." They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of their shared thoughts settling between them. Avon knew that the path ahead would be fraught with danger. The shadows were no longer just a physical force, they were a presence, a memory, a part of the orchard's very essence. And now, they were threatening to spill out into the world, to spread their darkness across everything. But Avon was ready. He had no choice but to face this, to protect the orchard and everything it represented. "We need to find the door," Avon said suddenly, his voice sharp with resolve. Myra looked at him, puzzled. "The door?" "The one I saw in the vision," Avon said, his gaze distant. "The one that opened when the shadows first emerged. There's something behind that door. Something I need to understand." Myra nodded slowly, a sense of understanding passing between them. I think I know where you're talking about. The old house. There's a door there that hasn't been opened in years. No one knows what's behind it. But I've always suspected that it's more than just a locked door. Avon's heart beat faster. Then we need to open it. Now. They made their way toward the house, the familiar path now feeling heavier with every step. The air was thick with energy, the same kind of energy that had pulsed through Avon when he had first taken on the role of keeper. It was as if the land itself was waiting for him, urging him to unlock the next layer of the orchid's secrets. The old house loomed before them, its weathered walls standing as a silent sentinel over the orchid's past. Avon felt a strange connection to it, like a piece of him was hidden somewhere within its walls. But he didn't have time for reflection. The door was all that mattered now. They reached the back of the house, where the door Myra had mentioned stood. It was old, covered in ivy and moss, its edges worn and cracked with age. But it was still solid, still standing as a barrier to whatever lay beyond. Avon took a deep breath and stepped forward. The key that Myra had given him all those days ago was still in his pocket, but now, it felt heavier, more significant. It wasn't just a key, it was the key to the next chapter in his journey. He slid the key into the lock and turned it, the metal groaning in protest as the door slowly creaked open. A gust of cold air rushed out from behind the door, carrying with it the scent of earth, wood, and something darker, something ancient. The door opened completely, revealing a small room beyond. It was dark, the only light coming from the flickering glow of the lamps outside. But in the center of the room, Avon could see something that made his heart stop. A stone pedestal stood in the middle of the room, its surface covered in dust and cobwebs. But it wasn't the pedestal that caught Avon's attention, it was the glowing object sitting on top of it. The object was a small, black stone, glowing faintly with an eerie light. The shadows that had been haunting him seemed to pulse around it, like they were drawn to it. Avon stepped forward, his heart racing as he approached the pedestal. "This is it," he whispered to himself, his voice trembling. "This is the source." Myra stepped beside him, her expression grim as she looked at the stone. "It's been waiting for you, Avon." "The shadows. They're connected to this." Avon reached out, his hand trembling as he touched the stone. The moment his fingers made contact with it, a surge of energy shot through him, and the shadows in the room seemed to rise up in response. They were not just a physical force, they were a living, breathing part of the land. He pulled his hand away, his breath coming in shallow gasps. "What is this? What does it mean?" Myra's eyes widened. "It's the heart of the orchard. The source of its power. And the shadows. They were born from it." Avon stood still, the weight of the revelation pressing down on him. The stone in front of him was not just a symbol of the orchid's power, it was the origin of the darkness he had fought. It was the source of the shadows, the force that had been controlling the balance of the land for centuries. and now, he had to decide what to do with it. Act 20, the final choice, sacrifice and decision. The room was quiet, save for the sound of Avon's breathing. His fingers hovered over the black stone resting on the pedestal, still glowing faintly, casting eerie shadows across the room. The energy in the air felt heavier now, suffocating, as if the entire orchard, everything that had happened, was building toward this one final moment. The darkness that had followed him, that had haunted his every step, was bound to this stone. It was the source. And now, it was his to control. Avon stepped back, his chest tight with conflicting emotions. The shadows had been pushed back once before, but now they were so much closer. They were a part of him, of the orchard, of the land itself. They were both light and dark, past and future. He could feel it all pressing against him, fighting for control. Myra stood beside him, her expression solemn. She had remained silent since they had uncovered the truth, as if the weight of the revelation had left her with no words to offer. But her eyes spoke volumes. There was fear, yes, but there was also pride. She had always known that this moment would come. What do we do now? Avon asked quietly, his voice carrying the weight of the question. Myra's gaze never left the stone. The shadows are a part of the orchard, part of this land, part of you. They can't be destroyed, Avon. You can't just eliminate them, they are too deeply embedded. But you can choose to control them, to keep the balance. Or, you can let them consume you, and with you, the orchard. Avon's hands trembled as he reached out and touched the stone. The moment his fingers made contact, the world around him seemed to shift. The shadows in the room twisted and coiled, wrapping around him like a suffocating fog, but there was no pain. Instead, there was an overwhelming sense of knowing. He could feel the darkness inside him, his fears, his regrets, his anger, his past, all rising to the surface. The stone pulsed beneath his fingertips, urging him to embrace it, to become one with it. The power it offered was overwhelming, intoxicating. You are the keeper, the voice whispered again, the voice he had heard so many times before, the voice that came from the very earth beneath him. You are the one who holds the memory of the land. You are the one who must decide its fate. Avon closed his eyes, his mind racing. He had spent so much of his life running from what he was. From the darkness inside him. From the memories he had forgotten, the shadows that had haunted him since he first stepped foot in the orchard. But now, it was different. He was no longer running. The truth was undeniable, the darkness was part of him, just as much as the light. The orchard's power was bound to both, and he had to learn how to live with it. To accept it. Myra had been right. He couldn't destroy the darkness. It was too much a part of the orchard's memory, of his own memory. But he could contain it. He could learn to live with it, to control it. It would always be there, lurking just beneath the surface, but he could use it, shape it, make it a force for good. I choose the balance, Avon said quietly, his voice filled with newfound resolve. I choose to control it. Not to destroy it, but to understand it. To keep it in check. Myra turned to him, her expression softening with understanding. You're choosing the hardest path, Avon. The shadows won't be easily controlled. They will always test you. I know, Avon replied, his voice steady. But I'm not afraid of them anymore. With a deep breath, Avon focused all his energy on the stone. The shadows seemed to respond, swirling around him like a storm, but this time, he was ready. He could feel the darkness inside him, could feel it pushing against him, but he didn't resist. He welcomed it. He let it wash over him, not to consume him, but to learn from it. He reached out, touching the stone once more, allowing its power to flow through him. For a moment, everything went dark. When Avon opened his eyes, the shadows had receded, leaving only a lingering presence in the air. He could still feel them, deep within him, but they no longer controlled him. They were no longer a threat. The stone before him had lost its glow, its power now a part of him, a part of the orchard. The balance had been restored, not just in the land, but within himself. Avon stood there for a moment, breathing deeply, as the realization began to settle in. The orchard was no longer just a place of memory, it was a part of him, and he was a part of it. The light and the dark, the past and the future, all intertwined in the same cycle. And now, he had become the keeper of both. Is it done? Myra asked softly, her voice filled with hope. Avon nodded, his gaze never leaving the stone pedestal. It's done. The shadows are contained. The balance is restored. Myra stepped forward, a smile tugging at the corner of her lips. You did it, Avon. You've faced the darkness and chosen to live with it. And now, the orchard is yours to protect. Avon turned toward her, a weight lifting from his shoulders. We will protect it. Together. And with that, the two of them stood in silence, the sun rising once more over the orchard, its light casting long shadows on the ground. The land was at peace for now. But Avon knew that the shadows would always be there, just as the light would. It was the way of the orchard. The way of the keeper. And he was ready for whatever came next.